3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. It's Thursday, isn't it? Is it Thursday? It's Thursday. I told you I'd get confused this week because of the bank holiday on the Monday. I put the bins out today. God, this is good radio, isn't it? I've already started off at the top of the... How are we going to carry on? How are we going to keep the pace? How are we going to keep the standard this high? Radio presenter reveals I put the bins out this morning, which means I thought it was Wednesday, but it's actually Thursday because the bins get put back a day because it was a bank holiday on Monday. Keith, are we recording this? This is one for the awards. This is one for the awards nominations, isn't it? So it is definitely Thursday, which means it's Mystery Hour at 12 o'clock today. I'm also keen to talk to the man who outed himself yesterday as the brains behind the secret Tory Twitter account. We had a conversation about whether or not it was newsworthy enough to merit a slot on the big show. We kind of didn't reach an agreement on whether or not it was newsworthy. And then I spent the show looking at the fellow appearing on every television programme in the world. But we were offered it first. But I just thought I'd just let the dust settle a bit first before finding out a little more about one of my favourite Twitter contributors of recent years. I haven't decided yet what we're going to do in the 11 o'clock hour, but I've got an idea. It's a bit grown up, a bit sort of not exactly news linked, but and it's a word that probably appears more on phone-in radio than any other, apart from I. But what do you think that word is? And not just this show. I'm talking about traditional phone-in radio. What word? It begins with I. There's a clue. You've got it, right? What word appears more on phone-in radio than almost any other? We might do that in the second hour, because in the first hour I want to do this, all right? So on Tuesday I sat here, when I do that little talk-up thing when Nick's still in the studio, I sat here and I genuinely was looking through my WhatsApps, trying to decide what would be embarrassing were it to go public. And the answer is... well, possibly the dullness of my social life, actually. But the answer is quite a lot. There's quite a lot of gags that I've exchanged with friends that I would not say on the radio, okay? They're not, I mean, I don't do racism or sexism or homophobia or anything like that, but I certainly would be a little bit more loose, shall we say. My language is worse. So there are WhatsApps. I can't really prove it to you, can I, by reading one out? But, for example, someone who's getting quite a lot of profile at the moment, who I suspect might be a complete lemon, if I hear him or her popping up on a radio or television programme with someone that I know, I have this week been mostly WhatsApping them to ask, is he as daft, is he or she as daft as they seem? Are they really that stupid? And so far, the unanimous response has been yes, even from people I don't know that well. So it was quite indiscreet of me to send that inquiry in the first. You see what I mean, right? If you were conducting an investigation into how on earth this programme managed to breach 17 Ofcom rules in 20 seconds on Friday, June the 2nd, 2023, then you would be going through all of my WhatsApps, and quite a lot of them would quite possibly have absolutely nothing to do with the record-breaking Ofcom breaches recorded on June the 2nd, 2023. And I would be not necessarily embarrassed, but I would be reluctant for you to see all of them. And I mean that. So we came in on Tuesday, perhaps, from slightly the wrong angle. I think I can't blame that, what's her shops on the Mail, Sarah Vine, Michael Gove's ex, because I don't think I'd read the article she wrote when we started doing this topic on Tuesday, but she essentially said, oh, it's horrible, you can't publish everything like that, because I once had an email read out on Sky News that I'd sent to my husband and it was absolutely terrible. Poor me. So I don't mean that. You know, if you're in public life, then there is a different level of attention or spotlight that is likely to follow you around, and sometimes that can involve leakages or leaks. So what I think I mean is fairness, right? I'm going to suggest to you, hand on heart, that it might not be fair to publish everything or to make available everything in Boris Johnson's WhatsApp messages and notebox with colleagues. And part of the reason why I'm thinking that is because Boris Johnson is such an irredeemable fraud. Fraud's not quite the right word. What am I looking for today? Because he is so morally corrupt, because he is so completely morally depraved. So the fact that he now wants it out there suggests to me that it is likely to do damage to people, that he is prepared, the price he is prepared to pay for that is the damage it would do to him, because he is essentially irredeemable now. whatever his supporters might say. I know, like Trump, you can never rule out some form of electoral return, but the system is different here. And that the level of his malfeasance and immorality has been so completely exposed that I just think that he is probably minded to do more harm than good. This isn't a complete reversal of my position on Tuesday, not least because you're going to spend the best part of the next hour either telling me I'm right or telling me I'm wrong. But the fact that he wants it all out there when we know that his respect for the truth is entirely non-existent. This is a man who is incapable of telling an unvarnished truth. Every single calculation he has ever made in his entire life, whether personal, professional or political, has been based on one thing and one thing only. What is best for me? In the shortest of short term, what is best for me? What gets me off this particular hook? What wins me the next prize? What is the next item I can guzzle to satisfy my bawdy appetites? What is the single most self-interested thing I can do in this instant, in this nanosecond? That's the key to understanding Boris Johnson. I explained it to you some years ago, and if you didn't believe me then you must certainly believe me now. Every single thing he does is based upon either the immediate gratification of his own largely disgusting appetites, never mind the damage it does to wives, to employers, to constituents, to mistresses, to girlfriends, to children, to family. Never mind the damage it does to politics, to democracy, to integrity. What's best for me? What's best for me in this tiny moment? So yesterday he decided that what's best for him is to publicly call for all of this information to be disclosed to the inquiry, the COVID inquiry, full and unredacted. He might not mean it, but that is what he has said out loud. In that little nanosecond, the answer to the question, what's best for me, is to call for the unredacted release, the unredacted handover of all of his WhatsApp messages and notebooks. We know, because they asked for a delay on Thursday and are even considering court action to allow them to continue not to hand it over. We know that the Cabinet Office doesn't want to do that. We know that the Cabinet Office has refused to hand over material relating to other ministers, citing privacy concerns and claiming that it could set a harmful precedent in government policy. And I think this is a moment for us all to de-footballify ourselves. Genuinely. I don't know if we can. I certainly don't know if I can. No, I can't with Johnson or Trump. I mean, they are now so obviously all of the things that some of us said they were. They've proved it beyond anybody's wildest expectations. They're every bit as disgusting and depraved as we feared they would prove to be in power. We know that now. That's not even a debate anymore. That's just counting. But in the bigger picture, can we de-footballify ourselves enough to wonder honestly whether or not there is actually a precedent, a dangerous precedent about to be set if we demand to see everything? Do you need to see the exchanges between the producer and I in order to have a full understanding of what has happened on the radio? Do you need to see all of them? Or do you just need to see the ones that are demonstrably and clearly about what happens on the radio? Do you need to read all of the messages that have been exchanged in moments of high passion? And I mean political passion. I'm not being, I don't mean shenanigans. I mean, like, you are in the eye of a storm and you say things that you wouldn't have said an hour before or an hour after that moment, but you say them in that moment and they don't have a bearing on bigger pictures. The legal demands also include WhatsApp messages sent from Mr. Sunak and other ministers at the start of 2020 as the government responded to the pandemic. And that, I think, is the crucial moment. I'm only asking the question at the moment. I'm not being mealy-mouthed. I think there is a case for discretion, for redaction, but I'm not sure it's a strong enough case. That's what I'm going to leave to you now. I'm going to ask you that question. But I do want you, if you can, and I've admitted that I find it difficult, if you can, take your scarf off now. Take your Tory scarf or your Labour scarf off and just address directly the question of whether or not it is unreasonable to expect everything to be handed over to the COVID inquiry. It is unreasonable to potentially expose ministers to being judged long after the event for indiscretions or indeed things that happened in the heat of the moment. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm talking myself out of it now, but I'm conscious of footballification. I'm conscious of my deep feelings of dislike towards an awful lot of things that have gone on over the last 13 years, never mind the last 3. I want to know what you think. Is there a case for not handing over everything, or all the exchanges between government ministers at the beginning of the COVID outbreak? And I will allow that side order question. I will. And that is, what do you think they've got to hide? And I want to answer that very seriously. I think we got 6 things on our list on Tuesday. I wonder whether that has changed at all. I wonder whether that has moved at all. What do you think they've got to hide? But I mean, there are no silly answers to that question. That's the point. They create this space, and whatever, if they won't tell us the truth, then anything can move into the vacuum that is created by the absence of truth. But things that might be unfair. That's the word that underpins this morning's question. Fairness. Is it fair to expect the inquiry to see everything when it could lead to the exposure of regrettable indiscretions that are not germane to the inquiry itself, but would do great reputational damage potential? I mean, on the one hand, what the hell are they worried about? They've got client journalists in their pocket now to the degree that you barely hear or see a word of criticism in the print media, and 80% are broadcast. So I don't know what they're worried about. It's not like Diane Abbott getting a sum wrong and spending the next 10 years being lampooned for it. This lot can do anything they want. They've still got cheerleaders for Boris Johnson in the press, even after all of the disgusting things he's known to have done. So on the one hand, I don't really know what they're worried about, because they're hardly going to be thrown onto a media barbecue by a media that spends its life sucking up to them. But for the rest of us, for the public, for ordinary voters, fairness. Is it fair? Or, of course, should it be for the chair to decide what does and what doesn't see the light of day? I just want to entertain the possibility that the Cabinet Office is acting fairly and responsibly in trying to protect ministers from full disclosure. 0345 6060 973. Not that any of these ministers are ever going to end up on full disclosure, but you know what I mean by that. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I mean, look, tell me I'm wrong. I don't want everybody to tell me I'm wrong. I would quite like to hear some maybe more cogent than my attempts to explain the Cabinet Officer's position. Because I'm sick of living in a country where I see corruption everywhere, you know? I'm sick of living in a country where I see the truth twisters triumphing. I'm really tired of it now. I know we're a long way from deliverance, but I am actually really tired of it. And what I want is a rational, cogent, persuasive account of why the Cabinet Office are not behaving in a really rotten way. I really, really want that to happen today. I really want you to tell me, to give me the reasons why this isn't yet more evidence of self-interest and borderline corruption or sort of self-protection, double standards, all of the things that we rail against daily on this programme. Please, God, let this not be yet another example of that. Let there be something here other than Sarah Vine bleating about having an email read out on Sky News that was so embarrassing. Oh, it's terrible. So something that goes a little deeper, something with a little bit more substance that actually does set up an intellectual tension between Baroness Hallett's demands for these documents and the Cabinet Office's reluctance to hand them over. I don't want to get to 11 o'clock and think, yep, just another nail in the coffin of political integrity in this country, forged and hammered home by Tories and lick-spittle journalists. I just don't. Seriously. That's what happens when you take your scarf off. It's 10:18. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. I can feel my pendulum swinging. If you pardon that slightly unpleasant image, I can feel my pendulum swinging already this morning because there's something that's just occurred to me that I didn't mention in my introduction that changes the story slightly. But given that my introduction was so blooming long, I can hardly go back and revisit it before taking some jolly old calls. Nikki's in Halifax. Nikki, what would you like to say?
Hello. I'm a bit scared now. I'm a first-time caller, but I always listen to your show and I find you really funny.
Thank you. Well, in a good way. Funny ha-ha or
Absolutely.
funny peculiar?
No,
oh, that's a relief.
Probably, yeah. I mean, you do make me giggle. You do make me giggle on my way to work. So,
that's the main thing. Well, you're opening the batting today, so what have you got?
Well, really, I think it should all be. I don't think it's unreasonable at all that it should all be brought out to the surface. I mean, at the end of the day, these people were responsible for everybody's lives over the last 3 years. And the thing is, I'm a nurse, and if I did something wrong, and I was held accountable to our registered body, the Nurse and Midwifery Council, I would have to literally show everything that I've done
would you?
Or not done.
Your private. I mean, you use your WhatsApp for work. But they wouldn't necessarily know that you had WhatsApp, would they? I mean,
not necessarily. But the thing is, I mean, when I register, when I pay my fee to be on the register, I've got to prove that I've behaved in a way that upholds the profession, and I've got to prove that. Things like Facebook and other social media outlets, if we've been found to have behaved irresponsibly, then we can be held account for that as well. So I just think, basically, I don't think it's.
Have you ever? Okay, so what if, in the middle of an exchange about the death of a patient, the avoidable death of a patient, or in the run up to it, what if you were WhatsApping about your dinner, which we could all do because you've got to eat, even if you're in the middle of a crisis or a scandal. If that came out, then it could be viewed in a way that made it look like you were callous and uncaring when you weren't.
Yeah.
When you weren't.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think if it it's a bit difficult, really, actually, because I would have. That's not related, and I think
that's what they're saying. They're saying some of it is not related. But Lady Hallett says a very interesting thing back, which is actually it is related, because I want to know, she has laid out in her reasoning last week, I want to know about the level of attention that was being paid to the emergence of COVID in early 2020 by the then Prime Minister and of course, by association, his colleagues. Yeah. So if they're swapping messages about the football, I think she needs to know, even though the football has nothing to do with COVID, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I could probably go along in some way, in a parallel from my perspective. I suppose if we was putting a patient in an unsafe position, so say if we left the ward, if I was on a ward, I mean, I was redeployed during the pandemic, but say, for instance, I went and had my dinner anyway and the patient was deteriorating rapidly, then I can be held account for that. So, I suppose... It would be out there. And finally, actually, I've two more quickly. One more. What do you think they've got to hide? Everything. Well, but what would be if you had to guess what the smoking gun is here that they're keen to keep? Oh, I think you probably got me stumped. To be honest. Well, I think it's an interesting question. And finally, have you ever exchanged messages about how annoying a patient is with a friend, with a colleague? No. Okay. I've not. I probably, if anything, I would have said how stressful a day would have been. Yes. But I am very, very careful not to bring anything that may identify anybody because obviously I've got my registration. It's like
I mean, I worked hard for it, and it's very precious to me. So
of course, I asked the question in good faith. I wasn't being suspicious, but I think
no.
Obviously, you're a very good nurse, and you take your duties very seriously. And it doesn't seem to me unreasonable that the people in charge of the COVID response politically should be held to the same standards as the people dealing with it on the front line.
Absolutely,
Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you.
How was that? And how did you find it first time on?
I actually found it not too bad.
There you go.
I thought I knew what I was talking about. Obviously,
well, that makes one of us. Have a great day, Nikki, and tell everyone it's not as nerve-wracking as it sometimes can seem. 26 minutes after 10. Ian's in Chester. Ian, what do you think?
Hi, James. How are you doing?
Very well, mate. What's going on?
Slightly different topic than the last time I was on, but I actually believe they should have access to all the information, and the reason for it is kind of based upon my own personal experience.
Yeah.
I'm one of the victims of the infected blood inquiry. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, of course I am.
So I'm not going to talk about that, but it was over 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It involved, governments all the way right up to the top, departments, civil servants, everything. Because they didn't deal with it there and then, there was a delay after delay after delay for 40 years. The full picture,
and there was more than delay, wasn't it? I think there was an appetite to keep the full facts away from the public.
Yeah, there was.
I'm thinking of Hillsborough as well, Ian. I mean, we know that the government, particularly when the government is in cahoots with the media and or the police, we know that they will try and keep things in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was messages and notes and minutes meetings went missing, or there was 100 pages and page number 68, for example, was missing, and it turned out that when they eventually found it, that was crucial to the whole thing.
Listen, I wish I could talk to you for longer, but your phone line is astonishingly bad. It sounds like you're in an aviary.
Oh, right, sorry.
Where are you?
I'm with the dog, taking a walk, actually.
You're out walking the dog. Where? Mars? I mean, there's all sorts of bleeps and squiggles going on in the back, but you got your point across. There is a long and very ungraceful history of cover-up. I'm thinking, of course, about Alistair Morgan, about Alistair discovering that his brother's murder, there were documents languishing in a safe. Subsequently, I can't remember whether I shared it with you. It was reported, so you probably saw it yourself, that they were not considered to be germane to the actual investigation. But they didn't know that until they checked them, and they've been languishing in a safe for 7 or 8 years, despite that being the most investigated murder in British history, or certainly the most investigated unconcluded murder investigation in British history. So, and Hillsborough, I've been writing about Hillsborough this week. Even I thought I was across it every time I start writing about Hillsborough, I come away feeling sick to my core at what was done. Knighthoods, even Bernard Ingham, Thatcher's press secretary, was sticking the boot in to Hillsborough families long after the event. The collusion between police, right-wing media and Thatcher's government was off the charts, and they bet the house on it staying silent, staying secret forever. They just picked the wrong battle, didn't they, with the families of the 97? So I'm going to cite Hillsborough here as well as a reason why everything should be handed over to the inquiry. But I'm still looking in very good faith for cogent and persuasive reasons why it shouldn't all be handed over, why the Cabinet Office should be able to redact. The problem is, then you've got to say, do you trust this Cabinet Office run by this Simon Case character? That's almost a rhetorical question, isn't it? The time is 10:30. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:33 is the time. The clever legal money is on Lady Hallett. But the prospect of the government going to court against its own inquiry is, I think, objectively incredible. The idea that they could be sued by the inquiry they set up. It's got a touch of the Dominic Raab's to it, hasn't it? I was thinking about this yesterday. Dominic Raab promised he'd resign in the event of the inquiry into his bullying, finding that he was a bully. But I think I need to check the chronology. I think that Starmer kind of squeezed him into it by promising to resign if that ludicrous Curry story led to him being issued with any form of COVID fine. I think we'd need to triple check the timings, but I think Starmer moved the goalposts. No, raised the bar didn't he, by saying, of course I'll go, which is precisely why the Prime Minister and the Chancellor should go. Of course I'll go if I'm found. I didn't even make the laws. But if I'm found to have broken them, I'd have to go. I would go, which at the time a lot of his supporters thought was a bit risky, but he's a former director of public prosecutions. It's possible he understood a little bit more about the law than the editor of the Daily Mail, who stuck it on the front page for 2 weeks. I think that's what turned the thumbscrews on Raab to the point where he felt he had to say, well, obviously, if the inquiry into my bullying finds that I'm a bully, I'll resign. And then the inquiry into his bullying found that he was a bully and he had to resign. And they're still whining about it. I find that incredible. We mentioned this yesterday. I've heard people try and blame the fact that Dominic Raab is a bully on the blob, which is victim blaming, actually. It's very important that you understand this. If you hear anyone using that word in the context of bullying by Priti Patel or by Dominic, oh, it's the blob, it's a blob conspiracy. That's blaming the victims of bullying for the punishment of a bully. Not that Priti Patel got punished, but she at least got outed by Sir Alexander Allen, who then resigned as the Prime Ministerial Advisor on the Ministerial Code because Boris Johnson chose to ignore the fact that Priti Patel was a bully and leave her in the Home Office. So if you hear someone trying to blame the blob over bullying investigations, accusations and conclusions, they are blaming the victims of bullying for the punishment of bullies. Be absolutely clear about that. That's why they use this ludicrous language, to cover up how morally corrupt they are. So if you think that the victims of bullying should be blamed for bullies being caught, then you carry on using that kind of language. But if you don't, then stop. Now would be my advice, if anyone were to seek it. This looks the same to me. They've called an inquiry because they had to, and now they're feeling the heat of the fire on their feet, and they're thinking, whoa, 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 when we said we wanted an inquiry, guys, we didn't mean we wanted an inquiry. I don't want you inquiring about that. I want you to inquire about this. But the idea of the government being sued by the very inquiry it set up, well, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, in many ways, we shouldn't be talking about anything else all week. 10:36 is the time. Up next, e-scooters. I'm joking. Susan's in Twickenham. Susan, what would you like to say?
Hello. Thank you for the programme.
You're very
All
welcome.
the programmes. They're wonderful.
Oh,
wonderful.
gosh. Stop it.
On this subject, I think, of course, everything has got to be handed over to Baroness Hallett. And she's been appointed, obviously, to go through all the evidence, and presumably she'll have a team to do that,
yes,
who will be sworn as well to secrecy and no leaks.
Yes.
And those documents and WhatsApp messages, etc., she has to go through them all and then decide what is pertinent.
Yeah.
And it's that simple.
Yes.
If there are more things that actually come out on the sideline, it's because of leaks. People like Isabel Oakeshott, for instance, who might get hold of stuff. But the Baroness
to be fair,
stuff,
she was handed it. She didn't do any journalism.
Oh,
she was handed it by Matthew Hancock
Yes,
on trust,
indeed.
and then she chose to break the trust. But this is a journalist who once saw a source go to jail. So quite what Hancock
Indeed.
thought was going to happen is anybody's guess.
Yes, it's one more mutt that we have in
Yes.
government. We've got a lot of mutts now, and that's also the problem. There are a lot of mutts now.
So we don't worry
who are
about
just-
leaking. Has nothing to do with the principle or the integrity of the inquiry.
Absolutely not.
You're quite
and
right.
I think Johnson has appointed Hallett. He's even said, he said this about Sue Gray, of course, how wonderful she is and how trustworthy. I think we have to accept the fact, High Court judge, etc., etc., etc. Let her do the job. And I imagine that Johnson, I'm sure he's got all sorts of nasty reasons for putting out the information. One of the fact is saying to the cabinet, okay, if I sink, you come with me, because I'm sure there's lots of stuff in there that he's hoping will be released.
And also,
However,
his reputation is pretty much now rock bottom. I don't think there's much that could come out that would tarnish him further. So he's sort of thinking, well, I'll take you down with me, almost.
I'll take you down. So it's up to Baroness Hallett to maintain the integrity of the whole process. And from what I've read about her, which is pretty minimal actually, is I can see that she is to be trusted, that she's obviously pretty tough. She said to these guys, I will take you to court if you do that. She's not
messing about,
now,
that's for sure.
She is not, and I trust somebody who's really doing that.
An former appeal court judge, sits as a crossbench peer in the House of Lords, as you say, appointed by Boris Johnson in, I think, December 2021. Why are they squealing now? Why are they squealing now?
That is correct. Because Now, there is one tiny little thing that does concern me,
yes.
Which is not to do with your question, really, so forgive me, is that I hear the rumour that any discussion in the COVID inquiry about care homes is going to be released only after the general election.
Okay.
And I'd quite like to know why. Why are they so worried about
I haven't
that?
heard that, and I shall inquire further. I think it's unlikely we'll have much released at all before the next general election, simply because of the speed at which these wheels ordinarily turn. But the problem is, well, it's not a problem. I think your analysis is pretty close to perfect. But there'll be some. What we don't know is what it is they're so desperate to keep out, because if it is truly irrelevant to the inquiry, then it won't ever appear, will it?
It will not.
So it's going to be a disagreement
also,
about what's relevant.
Not,
sorry, carry on.
Sorry, the inquiry is not about more parties.
No.
There may be something to do with the parties which is linked to the way the whole thing was handled, but this inquiry is not to do with Partygate.
No, and it will. I mean, I think it's thrown up possibly more parties than Sue Gray actually investigated, potentially. But you're right, that's not the central point of the inquiry. It might emerge, but that could be an answer to the question, couldn't it? That there will be evidence of more parties in these WhatsApp things, but will they be germane to Baroness Hallett's inquiry into the COVID response? Not necessarily. So there's a lot here, but you're right. It's a simple question: who are you going to trust? Whose discretion and integrity are you going to trust? A crossbench peer and former appeal court judge with a history of chairing official inquiries, or anybody connected to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak in any way whatsoever? I think that's a rhetorical question. But of course, if you want to answer, well, I would trust the people connected to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, not some judge. Then do feel free to ring in. Susan, thank you. That was lovely, and thank you for the kind words as well. Bar is in Alston in Cumbria, short for Barbara.
Don't call me that, James.
No, I didn't. I just people might not know that Bar is a popular abbreviation of Barbara, but you'll always be Bar to me, Bar. What would you like to say?
Hey, that nurse that kicked us off was very good, wasn't she?
It was, yes.
Right. To me, it's about the difference between me and Lady Hallett and the government.
Yes.
I trust Lady Hallett to know the difference between what is pertinent to her inquiry and what isn't. And I trust her to keep private things that should be kept private for the good governance of our country in, administrations to come.
Yes.
So if she thinks there's stuff there that would put the process of government in a light that might put good people off,
yes.
I trust her to keep that calm. I don't want to know what's on all those WhatsApp messages. I'd probably be bored by it.
But I want her to know.
But I want her to know, yeah. And what worries me is that the breakdown in trust between the government and, well, to be honest, not just Lady Hallett, but any form of scrutiny says more. You want to know what they're hiding. I mean, on the best, they could just be hiding a sort of laddish culture I want to know nothing about.
Yes.
They could be hiding, as the nurse suggested, stuff that is more of a don't care culture.
Yes.
If it's not going to affect me, we don't really care about it, we're not taking this seriously, which Lady Hallett does need to know about. But if
You're just right.
Absolutely everything comes out to the general public, not to the inquiry, but to the general public, there might be a lot of people. I mean, I work in a little leadership team, and the way we banter between ourselves is a good laugh, but we wouldn't want it to be known by absolutely everybody, partly because some of the people listening, it's very close to, that they have vulnerabilities in their life for whatever reason.
Well, that's what discretion means, isn't it?
Yeah, but I trust Lady Hallett's discretion.
Yes, and you can't not give it to her because of a fear of possible leaks, because then you'd never give anybody anything in any inquiry, would you?
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're bang on the money. So what do we think? What do you think they might be hiding? Or so keen to keep away from Lady Hallett, not from us. It's a brilliant point that you make. It's a crucial distinction. What don't they want her to see?
I wonder. I mean, generally with this current administration, I wonder if actually what they're hiding is sheer incompetence.
Yeah.
I think they've given up. I think they don't. generally Tories don't like to govern. They like to be in power. But I think this lot don't even know how to govern anything, and I think that might come out.
A touch of the Philip of Ockham there, Bar. A bit of Occam's razor, isn't it? The simplest. We can sit here for hours coming up with highfalutin, complicated theories and conspiracies. The bottom line might be we're going to look like a bunch of muppets if this stuff comes. That could be it, couldn't it?
Could be.
And when you see who was sitting around that table, I think that theory gathers weight by the minute. Bar, thank you so much. It's coming up to 11:15. It's brilliant to hear mainly female callers on this topic, and it's not, I think, coincidental, says an unsigned text. Which, I think you might be right. Actually, it's incredibly gratifying and probably the reason why the quality has been so high. There he is, being a misandrist again. James O'Brien, why do you hate men? It's 10:45. 10:48 is the time. If you thought the second hour of this programme yesterday was apocalyptic, then you probably missed the fact that my tongue was in my cheek, or at least we were keen to approach and acknowledge the levity. The world's maddest columnist, Alistair Heath in the Daily Telegraph, has written today, "The idiot West is sleeping as the end of the world draws near. The obsession with net zero has left elites bizarrely blind to the risks posed by AI, biowarfare and nukes." So what that means is if you were doing your recycling this morning, what you should have been doing is worrying about nuclear bombs, or indeed AI. If, for example, you think that the continued exploitation of fossil fuels is almost a suicide note for the planet, you silly old sausage, what about nuclear bombs? That is one of the maddest, and I'm collating at the moment, crazy columns, because they're a large part of explaining how we've managed to end up in such a mess, but that is a prize winner. In case you need it explaining, the intention by these sort of think tank adjacent right-wing loon buckets, the intention is to pretend that all the other problems are not problems at all. So you just go, oh my God, AI. How can you possibly be worrying about the environment? How can you possibly be worrying about racism? How can you possibly be worrying about all the things that nice people worry about? Don't worry about that. AI, you're ignoring. I mean, it's absolutely crackerjack, but hey ho, there he is. 10 minutes to 11, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Where we continue the question, which I think has been answered. They can't. You can't keep these messages. You can't redact. The only bit missing from our analysis so far, and there's 10 minutes left to provide it, is a full and irresistible account of why Boris Johnson is reportedly and apparently so keen to blow the doors off these messages that are, I presume it's because he's unembarrassable. You know, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. Turned out not to be entirely true, but among the base, among the Dorrieses and the Rees-Moggs won't make the blindest bit of difference. There could be a WhatsApp from him saying, I'm bored brainless by all this COVID business. I'm taking the rest of the week off. Over to you, Robbie. See what you can do with it. I'm just pretend I'm here. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a scarecrow in my chair. Actually, in his case, that would be a particularly a good move to. I put a scarecrow in my chair, and if anyone says Boris, I'll just yank a string from next door where I'll be playing World of Warcraft. I mean, honestly, how shocked would you be? How shocked would you be if Boris Johnson had put a scarecrow in his chair and sat in the next room playing World of Warcraft? Or, I don't know, reading Billy Bunter comics or P.G. Wodehouse? I've had enough now, chaps. I'll someone else deal with it. How surprised would you be? It could be anything in these messages, but why would he want them to come out? Why doesn't he care? Because he's unembarrassable. The man has no shame. If you have no shame, you can't be shamed. But the rest of them, we'll see. Josh is in Brussels. Josh, what have you got?
Hello, James.
Hello, Josh.
I can see your scarecrow and replace it with honey monster. That's more representative of what Boris Johnson looks like to me. But
no, you're spoiling my analogy, though, because a honey monster, we'd know it was... when I say scarecrow, I mean something that is supposed to look like Boris Johnson. The honey monster looks like the honey monster.
Yeah, okay, I can see.
Carry on.
So... I think we're being misdirected with this whole thing. I tried to call you on Tuesday, but didn't get through. But it was about this whole thing with the WhatsApp messages. And I think there's a slight misdirection going on in terms of what is in the messages. I don't think, as you said, they're shameless and unembarrassable anyway.
Well, he is. I don't think they all are. I don't think Sunak is shameless. I don't mean that as a compliment. I just mean he's capable of shame. Boris Johnson isn't. That's a psychological...
Well, maybe.
Factor.
But my thing is, I think it's to who they were talking to. I think that there are people in that WhatsApp group who shouldn't have been on that WhatsApp group. who were privy to information that they shouldn't have been privy to.
Well, that's it. Gosh. Yeah. So, I mean, you've got this character, Richard Sharp, who was knocking about Downing Street all the time, completely unelected, former boss at Goldman Sachs of Rishi Sunak, ended up being chairman of the BBC, conveniently and coincidentally, after helping to facilitate an £800,000 loan for Boris Johnson because he can't manage his own finances. So, why on earth would he be in the? Well,
exactly, James. And I think, maybe we'll get an idea as to where that £37 billion went and to who it went to. And I think they may be privy to things. It's not the WhatsApp messages.
Don't even need to follow the money. There'll just be question marks over why. Because I think Cummings in particular felt that he should be able to bring in whoever he wanted, just regardless of qualification or credibility, just because he kind of, liked the cut of their jib. Exactly. And that's fine. You can hire whoever you want, but access to privileged or sensitive information is obviously a legal matter.
Exactly, and that brings in the criminal element to it. And I think the reason why the word criminal is being used is because I think that somebody somewhere knows.
Yeah, maybe. There might be evidence of, simple breaches of obvious codes and regulations. And Johnson would be supremely comfortable with all of this because he's supremely comfortable with everything. If you're not capable of feeling shame, then you look at this scenario and you think, well, what's going to be the most fun? What's going to be most beneficial to me? Should we blow up that hand grenade? Yes, let's, because it's only going to hurt other people. It's not going to hurt me. There is literally nothing in these diaries and WhatsApp exchanges that would shake the faith of the Daily Telegraph, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries. Literally nothing. There could be evidence there of him pulling the legs off newborn kittens and using them as, cotton wool buds. There is literally nothing there that would make Nadine Dorries, Jacob Rees-Mogg or the Daily Telegraph go, actually, no, I think he's crossed a bit of a line there. I'm going to withdraw my support. So why would he worry? That's it. That's it. And all of these people paying him millions of pounds to deliver his speeches, they're not going to be following this. They're not going to be caring about this. It's not going to matter. And if it did reach them, it's not going to be through the pages of the newspapers that have been in his pocket for 20 years, is it? 10:55 is the time. Thank you, Josh. From Brussels to Exeter, Paul is there. Paul, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. My point is actually, I think the argument for redaction does have some merit in this particular case. I worked for 20 years in banking compliance, and when you're a registered rep, i.e. you have access to price-sensitive information or have important stuff that could potentially manipulate the market.
Yes.
All of your work-related conversations, WhatsApp, Zooms, emails, phone calls are recorded.
Yes.
And they are available to a compliance officer. I used to be one.
Yes.
But if you have personal, keep it on your personal device.
Well, we know that they haven't done that. We know that there'll be a mixture of both on these devices.
And then that's my point is, I'm stunned that government, particularly cabinet, do not have a system of recording all conversations for the record.
Like they do in America.
Like they do in America, exactly.
They say they do. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's why Hillary Clinton's emails were blown up out of all proportion by Donald Trump, wasn't it? Even though they were doing exactly the same thing in his campaign.
Yeah.
That's why. It's so that you cannot have back channels. You cannot have communications that are not being recorded for future reference.
And everybody on the conversation also knows that they're being recorded because disclaimers appear either in some cases 24 hours. In the case of WhatsApp, it's every time you start a conversation. It says this is being recorded and could be looked at by compliance.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, he has conversations with people who don't know that their conversations may be exposed.
So why are you suggesting there's a case for redaction then?
Well, because those people, whether they're nice guys or the good guys, they didn't know that these conversations could be exposed in the newspapers.
But surely the only they won't get into the newspapers unless A, Baroness Hallett decides that they're germane to her inquiry's conclusions, or B, they get leaked. Now, we've established that you can't keep them out of Baroness Hallett's hands for fear of a possible theoretical leak. You just can't, otherwise she gets given nothing. And that leaves us only with option A, which is they only get into the public gaze if Baroness Hallett thinks that they're pertinent to her conclusions, which means she needs them to arrive at those conclusions. So I'm not seeing your logic yet.
Well, it's not so much...
Logic is more fairness. You're saying it's not fair on some of the people involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was made very clear that this conversation could be recorded.
I'm lucky.
There is to your point though, and I'm not sort of really. I'm just saying there's a.
I like it. No, you're being thoughtful about other people, which is unlikely to be much evidence of that in the exchanges between the Conservative cabinet. But it's nice to be reminded of what it sounds like. Unfortunately, my response to that is tough. If she needs it, I'm afraid that your privacy, the fairness, the unfairness of you having a private conversation exposed is simply overridden by the importance and the urgency of the inquiry. That's all.
Also, if we did record, and if there was a central repository and the equivalent of a compliance department for government, then we wouldn't need to ask Boris to hand them over. They would be there, available and searchable within seconds.
And they wouldn't have done. They wouldn't have done whatever it is they've done that they are so keen to keep secret. So it's a wonderful circle.
Put it on a burner device or something like that.
Yes, well, of course they would.
Be bad guys.
Of course. And that's, I think, actually, this has been a very helpful hour because mixing together all of the calls, you've not only got a stone cold case for full disclosure, but you've also got some very interesting avenues to explore. So you're looking at incompetence. I love that from Bar up in Cumbria. They simply want to keep it all quiet because it makes them look like a bunch of clowns that so many of us suspect that they are. Then you've got the much more serious repercussion from that conclusion, which is that people died unnecessarily, something about which we're already fairly confident. Then you've got the stench of corruption, or at least cronyism. Why the hell are they party to these exchanges? What's it got to do with him? What's it got to do with her? Why are they in the room where it happens? I like to throw in a Hamilton reference wherever possible. And then, of course, you've got the possibility that Johnson, apparently Guito Harry, he's milking his 10 minutes in Downing Street, isn't he? It's absolutely incredible. But apparently he has described Boris Johnson as being epileptically bored, which is a bit insensitive for people with epilepsy, but hardly surprising in the context of Johnson's integrity. 11:02 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where that was a lovely hour. Thank you. I found that really interesting. I find all the hours that we spend together interesting, but some hours are more equal than others, aren't they? Some hours are more interesting than others. Okay, this is a tricky one. It's not tricky. It's just not typical. It's not natural phone-in territory. And I don't think I've ever done it before, but I'm getting so old and doddery now that it's possible I have, and I've completely forgotten. But it's something that bubbles away in the back of my mind whenever we find ourselves turning our attention, often reluctantly, to the issue of, yep, there it goes. I felt my heart sink a bit there in expectation. The issue of immigration. The single most significant factor, perhaps, or rather the demonisation or the weaponisation of immigration, the single most significant factor perhaps in our current national decline. And every time we talk about it, I'm conscious of dehumanising people. I'm conscious of doing it accidentally or reluctantly. I hope I don't, but I'm conscious of the possibility that I am. Now, an awful lot of people in the public space do it very deliberately. It's why they would call a person an illegal. They'd use illegal like that as a noun rather than an adjective, incorrectly and dishonestly. It's why they call refugees migrants. Migrant is a descriptive word, obviously, technical descriptive word, but it is not as emotionally loaded, is it, as the word child or person or human. And it's one of those areas where I think even the good guys, by a sort of form of, what would you describe it as? You'd describe it as a form of verbal osmosis. Even the good guys end up deploying the vocabulary of the bad guys. I always listen to BBC headlines. Is there a better word to use than migrant? I mean, you could just say people, couldn't you, in most of those headlines? Couldn't you? People crossing the channel in dinghies? Well, I mean, who else is going to be doing it? It's unlikely to be Dirty Gertie from number 30 coming back from her holiday in Torremolinos, is it? It's that these people are clearly going to be foreign nationals crossing the. So migrants doesn't mean anything, actually. Everyone's a migrant. I mean, everyone who comes here from somewhere else is a migrant, whether they're doing it via normal channels or safe passages, or whether they're risking their lives to get here, because that is what they are running away from is even more dangerous than the risks they are taking to get here. In most cases, not in all, but even that I sometimes wonder is an example of the corruptive nature of osmosis, saying, "Oh, you have to for balance, you have to point out that some of these people will not have their application." Why should I point out that some of these people will not have their application succeed if the racists and the liars who populate every corner of the British media never point out that 80-90% of applications are actually passed, so that almost everybody who they describe as a migrant or an illegal is a bona fide refugee or asylum seeker? It's a slightly problem with being, quotes, liberal, end quotes, is that you keep trying to play by the rules while the other lot are setting fire to them and laughing about it. It takes us back to Priti Patel in the investigation into her bullying. So I don't know what the answer to the question of language is on this sort of thing. I genuinely don't know. But I do know this. Every single time we talk about it, and goodness me, in the nearly 20 years I've been doing this job, we have turned the oil tank around, haven't we? The idea that radio phone-in, when I started work at LBC, any mention of the word immigration was just an invitation to racists and jingoists to ring up and either say disgusting things or complain that they weren't allowed to say disgusting things. And presenters would not just, go along with it. They would be absolutely loving it and stoking it and moving it on. But we seem to have made a small difference in that field together, don't we? By not being racist or trying not to indulge in racist thoughts, and proving, of course, that you can be incredibly popular without going down those roads of right-wing red meat and provocation and othering and demonisation and weaponisation and racism. But I still forget, or I still need to remind myself, when we turn our attention to a story about people who were not born here, I still need to remind myself that description fits a huge number of people listening to the programme. Now, I'm going to ask a really strange question in a minute that I've never asked before, but I really hope that you will answer it. If you don't, I'll just sort of fluff about for half an hour and then we'll talk to the Secret Tory at 11:45, or the man behind the Secret Tory account, and then it's mystery hour. But I'm not going to ask you the question yet. I'm just going to tell you what today's story is. It's new analysis that shows in many sectors now, non-EU foreign workers outnumber EU workers. There are now more non-EU than EU workers in a number of sectors that were previously reliant on European citizens. So the Brexit effect and the impact of international events on immigration patterns is now being measured. It's really interesting overall that the number of non-EU workers surpassed EU counterparts for the very first time in 2022. They've now got the numbers. That's an average of 2.7 million against 2.5 million workers last year. No prizes for guessing which sectors in which this is most apparent. You're looking at accommodation and food services, or hospitality, admin, wholesale, retail, vehicle repair. The shift towards non-EU and also British employees away from EU employees in those areas. It's not that there are more jobs, it's that there has been a replacement or a move from other sectors into this one. And I mean, that is interesting. The director of Oxford University's Migration Observatory, Madeleine Sumption, said Brexit had contributed to the shift with decisions such as the work visa system for care workers and the liberalisation of post-study work rules. But it is definitely not the only thing going on. There are lots of things going on. Now, I don't have a particularly strong position on this. I don't see it as being good or bad. I just see it as being life. We've made it harder for people to come here from one part of the world or from some parts of the world, and therefore we've had to make it easier for other people to come here from other parts of the world, because our economy, our growth, our future, particularly in a country with quite a low birth rate and an ageing population, even though very, very few politicians actually bother saying this out loud, we just need immigration, and we need it on a scale that will always be big enough to allow racists and jingoists to scare people who are susceptible to being scared, or to enrage people who are determined to be enraged. If they weren't enraged about that, they'd be enraged about something else. So the simple matter of immigration is a story of change. It is obviously a story of change. And the big change today is that the number of people coming here from non-EU countries now surpasses the number of people coming here from EU countries. Make of that what you will. If you're the bloke who rang me famously to explain that he'd voted for Brexit because there were too many brown faces behind the tills in his local Tesco, then obviously you're going to be spitting nails at this sort of news. But my response to you is that you should have paid attention when we told you what was going to happen. And also, stop caring so much about where people come from and care instead about the content of their character. It is such a liberating way to live. But I appreciate the exhortations to care more about where people come from than the content of their character are often irresistible, especially if the last thing you want to be judged by is the content of your character. So what on earth is this topic going to be, do you think? Anybody? Any ideas? Where's he going with this one? Does he know? Yes, on this occasion, actually, I do. I grant you that by 11 minutes after the hour, on many mornings that we've spent together, I haven't been entirely clear about where I'm going to be at 20 past, but I am on this occasion. And this is a conversation to which you can only really contribute if you were not born here. I think if your parents weren't born here, you can probably squeeze in as well. But when you hear the word migrant or the word immigration on the radio or on the television or in your newspapers or online, wherever it is that you're getting your stories from, when you hear that word, what do you feel? Because I have a suspicion, I don't want to put words into your mouth, all right, but allow me to think out loud for a moment. I have a suspicion that when you hear a conversation, possibly not on this programme, but on other programmes, certainly on other platforms, when you hear a conversation, you hear someone like Suella Braverman talking about immigration and saying we need to bring the numbers down. Just pause for a moment, especially if, like me, you're not someone who was born overseas. What does that... I mean, could you imagine if we said we need to reduce the numbers of Capricorns and you were a Capricorn? And it was just talked about so blithely by politicians. Even in Suella Braverman's case, a politician whose parents are both Capricorns. We need to reduce the numbers of Capricorns. Now, I know that they are talking about reducing the number of people who come here rather than reducing the number of people here who came from elsewhere. But they're not really so easy to distinguish or to separate, are they? You hear the word immigrant, migrant, immigration on the radio. You see it on the telly. They're talking about you, right? But I think most people, if not almost everybody, somehow constructs a psychological or an emotional protection system. Oh, no, not me. It's not me. And then you'll remember after Brexit, the calls we got that really shook me because I wasn't expecting them and I was just an observer. It wasn't my life that was being examined. The calls we got from people, you know where I'm going with this. You'll remember this. I keep hitting this note because it's crucial to understanding the mess that Farage and his mates unleashed. The number of people who said, well, my friend, my partner, my mother-in-law voted for it because they want to control, they want to get immigration down. And I said to them, well, I'm an immigrant. And they said, oh, no, we don't mean you. That phrase right there cuts to the heart of so much of what's happened in this country since we started letting really nasty people into the public space. You can't blame it all on Farage. The right-wing media has been doing it for years. In many ways, he was just their creation. If it wasn't him, someone else would have come along. All the columnists have been doing it. All the shock jocks have been doing it for years. Oh, no, I don't like that. Oh, it's got a strong accent. I went to the hospital the other day and they had a really strong accent. That's not right, is it? We don't want... Why can't we train our own? It's weird, right, that we have these conversations. And I'm guilty here, this tiny bit right here. I'm guilty of having these conversations without actually reflecting on the humanity. We've got to get immigration down. It's not a controversial thing to say. But it kind of is, if you're an immigrant, because the message that's arriving in your brain, if not your heart, is that there are too many of you here. And some of them come out and say it, you know, usually Billy Bunch of numbers with a bulldog avatar on Twitter. There's too many of you here. And you saw with Farage, didn't you, that it shifts. You know, traditionally, the BNP, the National Front, it would be about people from India or Pakistan or the West Indies. But then, of course, what the Farage project did was shift it onto white people as well, who came from Poland, for example, or Romania. It doesn't matter. It's you. There's too many of you here. And you hear people like Suella Braverman say it. Is she talking about her own parents when she says there's too many of you here? There's too many immigrants here. We must reduce the numbers coming, or we must reduce the numbers here. I don't get it. And I think this is, I don't want to over-egg it because I could be missing something. Wouldn't be the first time. I think it's really important. I think it's really, really important. And just because we've not picked up on it before, or people don't point at it, or just because it's bled into the public discourse in such a pervasive way, doesn't mean it's right. The conversation's completely skewed. So if you are an expat, if you came from elsewhere to here, if you are an expat, when you hear the word immigration on the radio, when you hear the word migrant on the telly, when you hear a politician talk about needing to reduce the numbers, brackets, of people like you and my own parents, close brackets, in Suella Braverman's case or Dominic Raab's case, what do you feel? Have you ever thought it? Does it pass you by? Is it not you? They don't mean me. They don't mean me. They mean the ones in the posters. I genuinely... I'm Irish, right? Sort of second generation. I'm adopted, so it's a little bit complicated. My mum and dad, and there's nothing on my mum's side, but on my dad's side, my Irishness goes, I think, third or fourth generation. But biologically, I'm a first generation, oddly. So second generation. Well, first, it's tricky. I was born here, but my biological mother was sort of on holiday, as it were. So I don't know what the rules would be on that. I've never really felt it. It was a little bit at school when the IRA were in their pomp. It was a little bit at school where if you had an Irish surname, someone would call you a terrorist. It never cut particularly deep. When my dad was on the Telegraph, there was one front page where I think there were 3 people with an apostrophe in their surname had bylines on the front page, and he got some hate mail, and it was all circled and stuff like that. So he framed it and stuck it up in the downstairs loo. That's the attitude we've always taken to racism, directed at the Irish in our family, or indeed to trolling, I suppose, an early form of trolling. But I don't know what that would be like. Does anybody hear that word? Do you hear that word and think they mean me? Or does everybody think they don't mean me? That's the bit I don't get, because I watch people like Dominic Raab, whose dad was a refugee, Suella Braverman, whose parents came from, I think, Mauritius and Kenya, Priti Patel, I think her parents were Ugandan Asians, and they talk about it in a way that I don't process. They've got every right to be as anti-immigration as a white person. They've got as much right to be here as I have, or you have, and therefore they've got as much right to be what strikes me often as racist. It's a tricky one. I haven't fully got my head around that. Expectation of attitude based upon background is not fair. It's possibly racist itself to say, well, you're the child of immigrants, you're not allowed to be anti-immigration. That's not fair. You can't say that to people. I do get that. I understand that. But who do they think everyone else is talking about when they talk about reducing the number of immigrants, reducing immigration, migrant being a dehumanized word? 0345 6060973. If you are, don't forget the caller who feared for the cultural integrity of Godalming, says Tom. I may have forgotten that call. Did it go viral? There were so many back in the day. I remember a bloke in Bishop Stortford who claimed he couldn't get to the tills in his local shop because of all the immigrants. And I just thought, I can't really deal with this in a sensible way. All I can really do with you, mate, is giggle. The dresses that you put on your racism in order to pretend that you're not just racist are ridiculous. But, you know, careers have been built on less in the British media and to a lesser extent British politics. So have you ever even thought about it? Do they mean you? 0345 6060 973. So you hear the words, you hear the debates, you hear the discussions, you hear the pledges from politicians. Do they mean you in your own mind? Or do you build up some sort of protection against what is in a sense persecution? What would it be like? Imagine if you're like me and you don't think of yourself in this way. Good God, the mental toll it would take on you if you thought, God, they're talking about me again. Oh, there's another front page about me. EU people, EU citizens in the run-up to Brexit, every front page, Daily Mail, Daily Express. God, do they mean me? Polish people, roommate, do they mean me? Oh, man. I hope that I have expressed myself sufficiently clearly for you to respond. Because I haven't asked a very specific question. I've just shared a bunch of thoughts in the hope that we'll be able to move into this space together. And if it works, we'll do it again another day, because I haven't got a great deal of time left. It's 11:21. 23 minutes after 11. If you were not born here, how does the rhetoric, the constant conversation, the hatred, the very careful and deliberate stoking of hatred about people who were not born here, how does it affect you personally? Let's start with Peter, who's in Coventry. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you very, very much for having me. First-time caller. I was born in Poland. I came here to this country about 17 years ago.
Yeah.
Started off with very basic English, learned from basics to now to the point where I run my own business, and I've got a 16-year-old son who doesn't know anything different to, well, obviously he was born in this country. Yeah. He never lived in Poland, and now he's kind of, after the Brexit fiasco and everything that's happened, we no longer feel welcome in this country, when we listen to the headlines and the news and all that. So we kind of have to put that out from the day to day, try not to listen. But
how old is your boy? How old is your son?
My boy is 16. He's 16-year-old. Been, like I said, going through educational system in this country. He's not Polish, but he's Polish. He's always going to be Polish. Yes. When he was born, he obviously automatically, as a European citizen, he automatically was assigned Polish citizenship. Yes. And because I was here in this country for just about 2 years when he was born. So he wasn't entitled to British citizenship. And now we're kind of looking back. Britain left the EU, and we're thinking, should we apply for British citizenship? So we started looking into it. And it turns out, after 16 years of contributing to the economy, contributing to the society and all that, we basically have to apply for citizenship and also pay for it thousands of pounds. And that's, we can.
Well, that is a mess. Yes. That's not rhetoric, is it? That is a declaration of second-class belonging. I don't have to pay to stay here. I don't have to pay, and yet your boy's contribution to this country is every bit the same as my children's, and yet they have a different status now post-Brexit.
Well, that's the thing. He goes to school, and he's a Polish child with Polish passport, but his friends don't know that they speak to him. They treat him as a normal human being.
Well, he is. I mean, crikey, what a depressing. I know why you chose that phrase, but that kind of proves my point. Do you talk about it then? Do you discuss? Because when you hear the word migrant on the radio, do you feel a shiver? Do you feel that it's you that's being talked about, or maybe it's you but not your son? Do you see what I mean?
I think there is so much going on the news that I kind of stopped listening to all of it because it's just disgusting, to be honest with you. Yeah. The way we label people, people on the boats you talked about, the people, migrants and all that. It's okay for British people to go abroad and live abroad and call them expats and have a life. But when people come here, the immigrants, they drain the system. That's how people present them in the news. And it's disgusting because all I did all my life in this country, and since I was able to work, I worked hard to get where I am, and that's why I'm teaching my son not to be drained on any system, not to rely on the systems.
Of course.
Be obviously he have his own future and travel the world and all that. But it's really disgusting to listen to government people talking about people who just come here probably to have a better life. Nothing else. And I never claimed any benefit in my life.
You don't need to tell me that, because I pay my taxes for the same reason you do, so that if either of us are ever on our uppers and need a little bit of help from society, we can go and get it. We deserve it. We have paid for it. It is our right. And it always squeezes me a bit when people say I've never claimed for anything in my life, because there's no shame in claiming for stuff either, Peter. I appreciate I appreciate
the people who require support. They should get the support.
Exactly. Is this the first time anyone's ever asked you these questions?
Well, the first time I was able to kind of say that openly out loud to to masses of people, because I kind of went, during the Brexit again, I went on the television program. It's called The Question Time.
Yes.
And the questions I wanted to ask, but never was able to kind of speak out for myself properly. One of the things was, look, I paid, contributed. If you don't want me here, can I just take the taxes, all of that I contributed, pay that to another economy, pay that into another system, and just move out? Can I do just that? Let me go and let me live my life somewhere else where I'm more welcome. Because the decent thing to do, really, for people who, after Brexit, I would really appreciate if someone actually, rather than saying, you're welcome here, but you have to apply, it should be, look, you stayed here for so many years.
Yeah.
Why don't you? We will give you the passport. We want
incredible.
you to be part of that culture.
You're so right, and the fact that you feel voiceless is exactly the reason why we're having this conversation. This was exactly what I feared and thought would happen. Is that this is. Everyone's part of the problem here, even people who are on the right side of history or on the humane side of these stories, even people who recognise everything Peter has described, that the terms of the conversation have been set by the jingoists. So that's how you can have politicians, children of immigrants, standing up and saying, we need fewer people like my parents here. We need to cut the numbers. We need to reject. And no one's ever stuck a microphone in front of Peter or a telephone or... And I can tell you now, looking at my screen, lots and lots of other people who are not necessarily going to say what Peter said. They may be here to tell me I've got this one completely wrong, but it's mad when you think about it. The casualness with which these conversations are conducted, the looseness with which this sort of language is deployed. It is inhumane. It is a deliberately dehumanising tactic that people who do not want to deliberately dehumanise people have sort of absorbed and emulated. That's why I use the word osmosis. It's like a verbal osmosis. Expat, most obvious example. Peter is a Polish expat living in Britain. Wouldn't look quite as grim on a front page or a poster, would it? We need fewer expats. No, only British people can be expats. Thomas Watts has got your headlines. 33 minutes after 11. I'm quite moved by how many stories from this programme you remember that Peter's story there has brought back to you. Eden, I do remember Eden, a Bosnian UN interpreter living in mid-Wales. His in-laws voted for Brexit to stop immigrants coming here, despite the fact their Welsh daughter, was married to him, a Bosnian Welsh grandchild. Andreas is in Basingstoke to continue this conversation. Andreas, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Whenever I hear the term immigrants or the talk that I talk about immigrants in the news, I just feel my insides rage.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm one of these immigrants that are luckily enough being called expat by the community because I'm white, sadly, or have the privilege of being white.
Yes,
and I have a highly educated job, and my accent is fairly masked on most days, thanks to me being very influential when it comes to these matters. But I'm just the feeling.
But it still hits you. So professional. Are you Scandinavian, Andreas?
Yes.
So
I'm originally from Norway.
So the rhetoric isn't directed at you specifically, but when you hear the word, you wince.
Yeah. Well, I know that if I'd been from, let's say, Eastern Europe or anywhere else in the world, I would have been called a migrant or an economic migrant seeking a better life, which is exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a job in Norway. It was midst of a economic crisis, and my field was flooded with experienced engineers, so I got an offer in England and I took it. As economic migrants, and why am I being treated differently? And whenever I hear the talk of we don't want more immigrants, I ask, well, what about me?
We don't mean you. I wonder who do you think they do mean then?
Well, whenever you try and dig into it, there's never a clear answer, is there?
No, there isn't.
So we don't mean you, and what do you mean? Like, are you talking about brown people?
Yeah.
There's never a clear answer. The others. You know
what I mean. You know what I mean. I know. I really don't.
No,
I really don't. So we've stumbled into. I have stumbled into something here that people like you and Peter and everybody else waiting to talk on the programme has lived with for years, decades, for forever in many ways, as soon as you arrive in this country. The casualness of the conversation, the way we never really register what an incredibly obnoxious thing it is to say out loud in a room full of people who may not have been born here, to say that we need fewer people like you.
Yeah, and it's a massive mental toll.
Oh, God.
I've had days where I just want to quit everything and go home because you don't feel welcome. Oh, thankfully enough, I got a lovely family around me, and they obviously don't feel the same way. But you can't help to feel that some parts of society don't want you here.
And no matter that the majority of the country is not caught up in these psychodramas and these horrible impulses and prejudices, the fact is that even the parts of the media that are open-minded or honest about these things, we use the same vocabulary, don't we? We need to do better. We need to do better. It's a big oil tanker to turn around. I wince on your behalf when I hear the BBC use these words, or newsreaders here, but I don't want to criticise colleagues because, we didn't write the rules, as it were. But when the BBC fall into the trap of using the word migrant, it's a value judgment, isn't it? There's a value judgment there, regardless of how white or Northern European or wealthy or high-earning or tax-paying you may be. You and Peter and everybody else feel victimised in that moment.
Yeah.
Well, I never. I'm sorry. I should have been across this much sooner, mate.
Don't worry. Thank you for being so understanding and letting us get this off our chest.
Thank you for noticing, really. It's pathetic on my part because it is kind of obvious, but it's the natural subtext. It's the natural successor to the "we didn't mean you," isn't it? For everybody. Thank you, mate. And I stress again, I know I boast a lot about my figures and they'll come down at some point and I'll have to stop boasting. But if this programme can be more popular than any other programme in this space, any other phone-in show on commercial radio in this country, if this can be the most popular one, then you are welcome here. It's just that our voices don't get quite as much amplification as some of the other voices, shall we say. Hala is in Shepherd's Bush. Hala, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm not sure whether somebody else has raised this point with you before. I haven't really listened much lately.
What?
I have got a note from my mum.
All
Don't
right.
worry, I'm sending
What
it.
have you been doing? You've probably been doing pharmacy or something, haven't you?
I have.
Yes.
I have.
Yeah, well, it's not good enough. That's just not good enough.
I know. I've been saving lives, and this takes me nicely to my point.
Go on.
To my point, that a job I love dearly, and I was speaking to your colleague just now and saying that the rhetoric that I'm feeling right now, I'm not sure if I've told you this before, I was born in Sudan.
Yes.
And just recently, some of the events that have happened as well has kind of highlighted some points to me that the government have been looking more at ways of how do we prevent more Sudanese people coming here legitimately now that there is a war.
Yeah, you're right.
There is a lot of that going around, which is obviously not being highlighted. But to me, one of the things that I have felt recently is the rhetoric of which you speak, for me, is specific to the setting that I'm in. So if I'm at work, whether I'm working remotely or in the pharmacy, I get treated differently because I'm obviously in a position of responsibility. Right. I am clearly, employed, have a job, pay my taxes and so on.
Yes.
And I speak the language that people speak and I understand their plight. So I'm okay then. Once I'm in civies, I'm on the bus, I'm at a doctor's surgery, I'm walking the streets, I'm on the tube. It's different.
Right.
And I feel it. I viscerally feel it with my two children. My husband's from Trinidad and Tobago, so can you imagine my children just look like they've, to some people, crawled from under some stones. So I feel it. But what I've really noticed more recently, James, is the rhetoric or the language that has changed. And I use the Donald Trump strategy. When he started speaking about building walls, and the language has been reduced down to a bare minimum. So now we don't have economic migrants. We don't have net migration. We don't have all these big words. We have stop the boats.
Yeah.
well, how many people is this going to mobilize? It will mobilize people who never voted before. And who are the people who are delivering Stop the Boat? Like you speak about, when we were talking about Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak. These are the people who are now mouthing the words "Stop the Boat." So therefore, it is legitimized because it's coming from them. So they are speaking about "Let's stop the boat." That's going to move people that have never seen a ballot paper before.
I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong. But their defence would be that rhetoric, that language addresses a very specific constituency of people coming here from elsewhere, and they would say, "Good God," they would actually say, "Well, we don't mean you."
Yeah, but then that is laced with a lot of cruelty.
It's racist code.
It's laced with a lot of. It is. It's laced with the cruelty of it. Because when you speak about stopping the boat, these are people who really are in need of coming here.
Yes.
But these are the people who are demonized. And guess what? Because I am Sudanese, I look Sudanese.
Yes.
Right. So I could potentially, to anybody else, when I'm on the tube, be one of the boat people.
Yes.
Right? So that really does add to this, underlying, bubbling, some comments that sometimes I have heard. And it really does make me question my presence here, the environment I'm bringing my children up in. But I'm also blessed with lots of very, very good, strong friends and my family who are here. So this gets me through. But I don't want to feel like at this stage of my life, that I'm getting through and I am living through gritted teeth. And I feel some days that I'm in an abusive relationship, if that's not too much to say, Jay.
No, I understand that.
I feel.
Like a form
that's
of
how I feel
coercive control. I'm so sorry to hear that, but I can't fault your explanation in any way, shape or form. I certainly wouldn't try and talk you out of the way that you feel. I think that would be, even by my standards, that would be a bit too cocky, a bit too presumptuous. It's.
But you take the time to listen, James, and like you've just said at the start, the fact that there is a program that allows people like myself. So after I come off this call, I feel like there are enough people out. We know your numbers, James, who have heard about.
Well, there are. We know there are. And speaking of numbers, statistically, we are in a better place than we were in 2016. It doesn't feel like that rhetorically.
It doesn't.
But I wonder whether the red meat is landing. That's why I can say that I hope you're wrong about the electoral mobilisation of racists and racism with the Stop the Boats rhetoric. To me, it doesn't really seem to be working, and it's not reflected in public concern about immigration in general, or about expatriation, as we should start calling it, in general. It's not happening. But you just wonder, give it a year of front pages, and would it all be on fire again? I think we both know it probably would be, don't we?
Yeah, and it's lived experience, I guess is what really would impact one person over another. I think lived experience has a lot to do with how we are feeling as a community generally, and how we feel about our children who were born here.
And that's a crucial point, and that's you and Peter, Sudan and Poland united in the same space, and it's a space that has been denigrated by people who call themselves patriotic. Hala, thank you. I shall let you off. The usual punishment for not listening to the programme, although I don't really understand why you can't have me on in a pharmacy. It could be a sort of form of anaesthetic, couldn't it? It's 11:45. Let me just read you this quickly from John, who's in Newcastle. He says, I used to live in Sweden, James. I swear the Swedes would sit with me having a beer and say to my face, John, I really don't like all these people. I nearly did an accent then. That would have been a bit inappropriate. I really don't like all these people coming here. They don't speak our language. They take our jobs and date our women. And they knew full well I was an immigrant living in their country with a good job, not speaking their language and dating their women. Add inverted commas as appropriate. The point is that this is definitely a white Northern European issue as well as a British one. It was quite an experience to be hit by the double standards and the total lack of understanding that I had all the characteristics of their bogeymen, but I was sufficiently like them. That's John literally living the opposite experience of Andreas's. It's incredible. But knowing somehow that they are also talking about you when they talk about, quotes, them, end quote. Gosh, it's 11:46. It's 10 to 12, and I'm very delighted to announce that I'm now to become the last media organisation in the country to interview somebody called Henry Morris, also known as the Secret Tory, who outed himself yesterday after several years of providing far more amusement on a single Twitter account than I would have believed possible. And Henry joins me now. Why now, Henry? Why have you chosen now to break cover?
Hey up, James, how you doing?
I'm grand. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you, mate. Now, because one reason the political world is full of disinformation and things going on, which I've contributed to at times. I've been putting out WhatsApps, which people have mistaken for real and got upset with Tory MPs for, and I've thought I'm contributing to a malaise where they're providing enough of this content themselves. They don't need me throwing it into the mix.
I didn't realise people thought you were real.
Neither did I. I really didn't. I thought it was a good 5%. But yesterday there was thousands of people before I said who I was. Are you Michael Gove? Are you Des Swain? Are you Mark Francois? They were just guessing, but like people really trying as well. I was telling them a made-up majority, and they were working out who it could be.
I guess it's because I followed you from the start, so I've followed every twist and turn. Because the account originally was a Mark Francois parody account. So if anyone had been following you from the start, they'd know that it was a Mickey take. But if you'd stumbled across elements of your output, particularly perhaps the WhatsApp groups, then, yeah, you may have thought that you were some sort of whistleblower. But there was genuine disappointment and even, I think, Henry, a degree of outrage yesterday.
More than a degree. I got a few death threats yesterday. Very exciting.
Oh, my
days. The Daily
days.
Mail comments section was brilliant.
Was it really?
I'm a degenerate. I'm a stinking degenerate, clearly unemployed.
Welcome to the club. Well, yeah. Let's pick up on that element, if we may, because the quality of the satire was superb, and you are a personal trainer, I think, is your day job, but you do lots of other stuff as well. You're a bit of a plate spinner professionally, clearly. But did you? I can't say have you always been funny. It sounds like a Mrs. Merton interview, but do you see what I mean? I mean,
I know what you mean. Yeah. I was always under the impression I could make my mates laugh. Yeah. And then one day my mate Leon he messaged me while I was in the gym and he said, "Why aren't you doing a Mark Francois parody account?"
Right.
I was like, "Oh yeah, good question." So I did a Mark Francois parody account and it immediately took off and had 20,000 followers in like a month or something. And I won't lie, it was very pleasant to find out not only could I make my mates laugh, I could make everyone else laugh as well, it seemed.
So that was it. And you realised pretty quickly that you had a gift for this. So clicks and clout, but also the pleasure of delivering comedy.
The pleasure of delivering a good joke, but also it seems I did have quite an affinity with Mark Francois. I've got more similarities with him than I'd care to think. Because I was getting messages from people who work with him closely saying, "Mark's constantly scrolling your feed, trying to work out how you know so much about him."
Oh, that's brilliant.
So saying he had like a mock Tudor carport and drove an ice white Range Rover Evoque around the M25 to unwind.
You got a book out of it, a very good book. So, I mean, there is a...
I got a book out of it, yeah.
You did. You're more than welcome to plug books on this show. I never do. Right, yeah. I never do, but you can. What's next? Because you're not going to just fade back into obscurity.
I'm not going to fade back. I'm loving it, aren't I?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I work on the assumption if I can make people laugh pretending to be a Tory, yes, I can probably make people laugh. Unless there's a weird alchemy about Tories, which instinctively makes people laugh, I can probably do it as myself.
So you're going to have a crack then? You're going to have a crack at being Henry Morris rather than Mark Francois Napat or
Mark
the Secret Mark Francois Power or Michael Cove or the Secret Tory. I think
there's loads of stuff I'd like to do. I get up at 5 every day and I'm trying to write sitcoms, trying to put my ideas down. But there's lots going on. My wife's about to give birth. She's one day overdue.
Wow.
And so any minute now, I'm about to not be doing anything for a couple of weeks.
Well, enjoy it, Henry. And congratulations, mate. You've brought so much joy into my life. I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. And into many other people's as well, clearly. You're going to miss it. But as you say, it's a question now about finding a new horse to ride.
Finding a new horse to ride. Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been very... I thought I'd get a big backlash yesterday of people saying all sorts of nasty things, but I got a lot of love, people saying thanks for keeping us entertained during the pandemic.
And what happens to the account now?
Well, I tried to change my name to Henry Morris, and I'm not allowed to do it according to Elon Musk. So it says it's frozen. So I'm like that person who made a face in the wind. I'm stuck as a secret Tory forever.
Keep us posted, Henry. Let us know, and we'll give you a bit of a boost whenever it is that you launch your next project. I'd be happy to do that.
Let's talk to you, mate.
Look after yourself. Henry Morris there, a.k.a. the Secret Tory, one of my all-time favourite tweeters. Absolute genius. And we made contact ages ago, and I thought he was yanking my chain when he said I'm a personal trainer from Yorkshire. I don't know why. I just thought he probably worked for Private Eye or something like that. The quality of the satire was so high. Oh, now you know. Back to this question, which we will do on the programme again, possibly even tomorrow, because we have truly found a previously untapped seam of experience here. What's it like to not be born here and yet witness the conversations we have about immigration, framed almost always, even by the good guys, in a way that is dehumanising? Michael is in Redbridge. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time talking to you. Been listening to you since the days of parking tickets.
Welcome. Parking tickets, cheeky beggar. I've never done Anyway, e-scooters are the new parking tickets, Michael. You obviously didn't get the memo. What do you want to say?
Well, James, I want to bring in a dimension that I think some of your callers have kind of touched on a little bit. So for me, someone who came here from Nigeria about 16, 17 years ago, what I find is that I feel like they're talking about me, but at the same time, they're not talking about me. And I'll tell you the difference. So they're talking about me because they're very clearly talking about people with my skin color or different skin color from the typical in this country.
Yes.
I feel definitely they're talking about me because of the difference of my, I have this, most people don't have the accent that I have that are from Nigeria.
Yes.
But at the same time, they're not really talking about me again because they kind of tolerate me in a way because of the way that my accent sounds compared to how others sound because of my socioeconomic class. So the classism comes in. So they kind of tolerate me more because there is a level of you're different. You're not like them.
Who are them? Who are them?
Well, the typical immigrant that they picture, and I know many of them because they're my country people, they're my fellow Africans, and so on, because they are people who are have come into this country and are starting in a way, in the same way that I started years ago, either as a student or, starting in a new job. They very likely speak very, African accent or Nigerian accent, depending where they are from Africa. There are people that automatically they see as
inferior,
bringing a negative. Yes, inferior, bringing something negative.
Yeah. And yet, I mean, it is so bizarre, isn't it? There's sort of internal distinctions that people make, possibly even everybody makes, but the people complaining all the time about immigration, they don't mean you, except of course they kind of do. They
do, exactly, and that is that's the key. That's the second part of what I wanted to say, James, because you see, the main thing is my attitude to these people and the issues that they seem to care about because of how they tolerate me or don't tolerate me. Yes. So some people like me who are in a good socioeconomic position, are tolerated more, begin to see it, mistake it as acceptance, and think that it means they're now one of them. And they now need to be like those guys who hate people, the other people.
Yeah.
And that's where I believe that people like Swala Braverman come in, because she feels that she's different. She feels like she is that different.
No, they really don't mean me. They really don't mean me.
Exactly. But except they really, really do. And so it's
fascinating.
That kind of a situation. It is fascinating.
And in some ways, you use that. I mean, the more performatively unpleasant you can be on the issue, the more you shore up your hope / conviction. Your credentials. That's the phrase.
Yes. Absolutely. Wow. The more you do, the more they tolerate you. That tolerance increases.
I can prove they don't mean me by joining in the rhetoric about immigration. The rhetoric.
Because by chance, you might just even creep into the acceptance. They begin to creep into the acceptance level rather than tolerance.
And then you get little wake-up calls like Rishi Sunak losing the Conservative leadership election against a complete flump when he was, for all his myriad faults, he was by far the better candidate, but not for the membership.
Absolutely. Or you go on a train where people don't know you, as one of your callers earlier said. You go on a train where people can't see your class and they treat you badly or poorly, and then you realize, wait a minute, they are talking about me.
This is out there all the time. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, every caller on this. My apologies to Simeon and to William, Danny, Lee, Sangeeta, Mark, and others. We will definitely return to this. It's a absolutely riveting conversation, and one which I'm a little bit embarrassed to have only got around to having today. It's been bubbling in the back of my mind. How do these conversations feel to you? And then I suddenly realised yesterday, actually, on the way home, well, have the conversation about how it feels to you. Don't have another conversation while wondering how it's going to feel to you. Have a conversation about how it feels to you. So we did, and it was great, and we'll do it again. But it's Thursday, and it's 12:01, which can mean only what? Well, it means several things. It might be lunchtime for you, or, I don't know, time to put the bins out. But here, it means it's Mystery Hour.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Oh, is it that time of week already? 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Henry Morris, a.k.a. The Secret Story, has a YouTube channel that I would recommend as well if you are not a Twitterer. Or a tweeter, like we call ourselves these days. This is it then. This is Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. That's it, actually. I'm not going to do a particularly lengthy introduction, except to remind you that there are prizes, or a prize. There is a Mystery Hour board game for the contributor who I delight in the most. My favourite contributor of the day, of the hour, of the week, will receive a brand spanking new Mystery Hour board game. Something that is obviously highly prized, but it is accessible from other places as well. You don't have to be a winner to get it. Well, you'd be a winner if you get it. It makes you a winner. Anyone who's got it is, by definition... Oh, I'll try again. You can buy it as well. All right, you don't just have to win it. But if you do buy it, you become a winner. Because by dint of owning it, you've won. You've won a little life battle. You're a winner. Woo! You can get it at mysteryhour.co.uk. You can find out the full terms and conditions for this conversation at lbc.co.uk. And that's it. I think we'll just crack on. Last week was vintage, so I don't want to jinx anything. But the bar is high. Particularly enjoyed. Did we get an answer? Yeah, we did get an answer to the pigeon question. I gave the game to the pigeon question, didn't I? I think. But anyway, who knows? Listen to the podcast. 6 minutes. Oh, and that's something else I should mention. There is a podcast, a self-contained podcast, which obviously you can get from Global Player, but there's an archive. So you can, the holidays aren't quite here yet, but very useful for long car journeys to download half a dozen Mystery Hours. Because obviously they're not an hour by the time you've downloaded it without adverts and stuff like that. But there are loads and loads and loads going back years, if I'm honest. We should actually get the date, shouldn't we? We should establish when the first one actually was, but we weren't recording it then, so we may never know. Shall we crack on? Graham is in Leigh-on-Sea. Graham, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
I made myself a lovely hot cup of tea 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, I got very busy. And 10, 15 minutes later, I got my lovely packet of biscuits out, started dunking.
Yeah.
And the biscuit did not soak up the tea as well as it was when it was hot.
In a tepid
and I
tea?
just wanted to know why. Yeah, in tepid or lukewarm. Doesn't appear to soak up the tea very well.
So why does a hot tea soak the biscuit more effectively than a cold tea?
Yes.
I like that question.
Well, the benefit was I didn't drop any in the tea.
Oh, well done. That's technique. Well, of course it is, yeah. Is it heat? I mean, the steam. It'd be steaming it, softening it with steam. I mean, get absorbed,
but
why?
You've gone past the steam into the hot tea, haven't you?
No, I know, but the heat softened. But then that doesn't answer your question. Why would it? Why would hot water be more of a softening agent than cold water?
Because my brain just went, is the water thinner when it's hotter? and I just dismissed that. I don't know.
Thinner.
I don't know the answer.
No, I don't know the answer either. I like that. I mean, there are... I don't know whether I dreamt this or imagined it, but I think there are people who work for McVitie's and biscuit companies who do tests on stuff like this, aren't there? Because it's a crucial part. It's a crucial part of the biscuit eating experience.
Yes.
So someone will know. We may even be in Ray Liotta territory if we get in a professional biscuit dunker. But obviously, I don't want to jump any guns. Thank you, Graham. What was your biscuit of choice, just out of interest?
It was at that moment in time. It wasn't a choice. It's just all I had available was a nice.
Oh yeah, you say nice. So I say niece actually. I don't know why. I'd always say a nice bit. Anyway, I like. It's not a bad biscuit. Not a good dunking biscuit at the best of times though. Probably want to go with a digestive for maximum dunkability. But the physical question stands: why would it be more absorbent in hot water than in cold or tepid or lukewarm? Thank you, Graham. Terry's in Gurrock in Scotland. Terry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Yes.
Why do Scots people walk on the right?
Pardon? How do you mean?
Well, you know how in England, if you're walking along a pavement and someone's walking towards you, people naturally walk on the left.
Do they?
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm just going to do a bit of role play. I'm just walking down the road. Someone's coming towards me. So if you're walking towards each other head on,
yeah,
you think in England you would favour the left? You'd both move left to avoid each other, and in Scotland you'd both move right?
You're supposed to move right, yes. I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, you're asking the question as if it is beyond query. I'm not sure I recognise how much research have you done, Terry?
Well, I moved to Scotland 2 years ago, and my research is almost bumping into people a dozen times a day.
Well, I mean, when did you notice it immediately?
Immediately, yeah.
And then you tried to work out what was going on, and you thought, I always favour the left, and not everyone here favours the right, and that way, madness.
No, everyone, it's just the opposite.
Well, I
talk to them, I say, why do they do it?
Yeah.
And they don't notice it.
Do they know that they do it?
Bump into me.
They don't even, but I don't know, I'm English, and I don't know that I recognise the left-leaning side of this question. Do you, Keith?
You asking someone else?
Yeah, Keith.
Oh,
sorry. I just needed a second opinion, Terry, that's all.
Have you had it?
Yeah, he's not sure. He thinks it's 50-50. I think I wait to see what the other person does and then go.
Oh, yeah, well, so you have a little that little dance back
exactly.
and forward.
Yes, the commuter shoe shuffle.
Yes, yeah. Well, I have the opposite. I just bump into people here.
You've had 2 years to recalibrate, Terry.
Yeah, and I do it most of the time. It's just when I switch off, I'm thinking about something deeply, and then just bump someone.
We've all been there. All right. Well, I mean, I may open the challenge. The question may be challenged by Scottish people. They may say, "No, I don't. I reject Terry's question entirely." But
well, be careful of that.
I will.
Because I talk to my friends about it, and they deny they do it.
Yeah, well, they might be right though.
But they do
it. No, okay, you're on. I mean, it's a question. I'm just not quite sure what the answers are likely to be. It's on the board, Terry.
I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's worried me for 2 years.
Well, I don't put the pressure on me like that. We may not get you an answer. You may be worried for another 2. 11 minutes after 12 is the time. Jack's in Welshpool. Jack, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
I've worked in CCTV and been a delivery driver for 6-7 years in between and so on.
Yeah.
And I've been wearing high visibility jackets the entire time.
Yeah.
I've never understood how does the strips, high visibility strips, how do they work?
What do you mean?
Like it's like when you shine light on them, they light up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Like how does that work?
Well, they're fluorescent, aren't they?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It like it's a material or something like that? That would be.
It has fluorescence.
A fluorescent. I wasn't very good in school.
Well, no, don't. I mean, mate, it's a science question, and I'm sounding confident, so almost certainly I'm setting myself up for a fairly hefty fall. But it reacts differently to light, to non-fluorescent stuff.
That's what I was thinking, but I just couldn't get my head around it. Is it a specific material that just lights up when light is shined on it?
Yes.
It's like okay.
Yes. That is called a fluorescent material, I think. But that doesn't tell us how it works. Why does it light up when you shine a light?
Yeah, I think that's my question. Is why? what is like? Is it because of the material itself? Because I mean, when I'm looking at mine right now, and I can see little like bits of maybe glitter. Like it looks like glitter, but it's not glitter. If that makes sense. I'm looking at it right now, and I can't. Yeah, it's just baffled me. It's baffled me
now. Well, except I mean, you've heard the word fluorescent before.
Yeah, I've heard the word fluorescent before, but I've never thought of it as a material.
Well, it is, but that's not the answer because I still doesn't know how it works. I've just given it a name. I haven't given you an explanation. So we need an explanation. So what you're really asking is how does fluorescent stuff work?
Yeah. There we go. There we go. That's it.
Okay, that's teamwork. That is, Jack. Teamwork, mate.
Perfect. Thank you, James.
Well, let's hope we get an answer. 13 minutes after 12 is the time. Etty is in Kentish Town. Etty, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
As it gets warm, why, when it's really, really hot, is it almost impossible or really unpleasant to fall asleep without a blanket?
You mean even if you don't want the warmth provided by coverage, you still need something? I think the answer lies in the question, Etty. I think it's like a sense memory, isn't it? And you relax only when you are in some way cocooned.
Is it more than that, though? Is there sort of something to do with the circadian rhythms or serotonin or all of these sleep things?
Unlikely, because I think in a really hot country, people don't have sheets.
I think mostly they do.
I made that up.
I think.
No, I made that. I made that
up. Country
I made that
I've
up.
been to, even not staying in a Western place.
What about
always
Abu Dhabi?
Bed covering.
What about Abu Dhabi?
Dubai, close enough.
Have you been there? And they had, well, you've got a lot of air conditioning though. Then, so if you were sleeping
I don't know. When I camped in Kenya, boiling hot on the equator, they still give just tiny little sheets.
Yeah, and it gets cold at night even
underneath.
It gets cold at night even in really hot countries, doesn't it? Of course, sometimes.
It was horribly hot.
All right, you're on.
Everyone still had to go underneath.
Why do you?
Is that habit, or is it something more than that?
No, I like the question. So it is essentially because it's. I can't sleep unless I'm under a cover, even though I'm warmer not under a cover than I am normally at home under a cover. If you see what I mean.
Exactly.
So it's not just for warmth. What else does it that you're on? All right. Why do we need a blanket to fall asleep? Why? Even when we're really toasty. Thank you, Etty. I thought I might have dropped some clangers with the fluorescent question, and glancing at my inbox, it would appear that I did. Good job. I saw it coming. It's 12:16.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:18 is the time. Why does a biscuit dunk more effectively in hot tea than tepid tea? Why do Scottish people lean to the right when they find themselves heading directly towards another person on the pavement? Brackets, if indeed they do, close brackets. Terry might have gone off on one there. What is it about high vis that works? How does it work? I think it's more about the strips than the material. Was it the strips more than the material? Anyway, you know what he's talking about. And why do you need a blanket to fall asleep, even if you're really hot already? Lovely selection of questions. Pratap's in Islington. Pratap, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer for the tea and biscuit question. And the answer is that because there is... So tea and biscuits, when you dunk a biscuit into hot tea, an exothermic reaction takes place, which basically means that the energy given off by the heat in the water and the tea actually starts to work on the molecules and the atoms within the biscuit. And
endothermic, surely.
Exothermic.
But it's not giving off heat.
The tea is.
Yeah, but the reaction isn't.
No, but okay, yeah, but still, the tea is giving off heat into a surrounding.
Yeah, so it's heating up the biscuit. It's heating up the biscuit.
It's heating up the biscuit.
Yes.
So when it's cold, the molecules in the water aren't moving fast enough to produce any energy. So they will still work on softening the biscuit, but it'll take much longer.
So what do the molecules do? As the molecules get hotter, they move more, and because they move more, they absorb more water. That last bit I don't get. Why would moving the molecules around make them absorb more?
No, because the heat from the tea will cause the molecules in the biscuit to then start moving and activating. So then they will soak up the liquid more.
Why? Why does a moving molecule soak up more liquid than a non-moving molecule?
For example, another example is if you put a cake into a cold oven, it's not going to cook. If you could put a cake into a warm oven, it'll cook, but it'll take, say, 10 hours.
Yeah.
If you put a cake into a hot oven, then it'll cook much faster, just because of the chemical reaction between the heat and the elements in the cake.
I'm not so sure about this. What are your qualifications?
I'm a chef, and also kind of obsessed with food science.
Because I think you're obviously right about the cake.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're right about the biscuit.
Okay, equally, I think it's also to do with heat, to be honest.
I know it's to do with it. You're not going to get a round of applause for that, Pratap. Of course, the question is, why does the heat make a difference? And you said it's all to do with the heat, to be honest. Of course it's to do...
So if you left the biscuit in the tea for long enough, say for an hour, it would still be soft and dissolved.
It would. So the heat makes it absorb it quicker, but we don't... you can just say molecules. You can't, I don't think I can...
softens the biscuit.
Yeah, but you just say the heat softens the biscuit. How and why?
Because it starts to activate the atoms and the molecules, so they start moving. And if they start moving, then their structural integrity...
I'm going to give you half a round of applause, all right? Because I don't think...
I'm sure Professor Hal will hopefully ring in with us to his inquiry.
Well, we will find out. So I take this with my compliments.
All right, thanks, James.
But no, thank you. There's a bit missing, and it might be my understanding. That's the problem with science questions. Oh my goodness, it's as if by magic, Professor Pratap, come back.
Yeah, I'm here.
Guess who's on the line?
Professor Hal.
Professor Hal's in Brighton. Professor Hal, question or answer?
James, if only you'd come to me sooner.
And Pratap, say hello to Pratap. Don't be rude.
Hello, Pratap. My dear chap, how nice to meet you.
There we are. That's nice, isn't it? What did he get wrong?
I'm going to be very diplomatic about this.
Yes.
My answer is completely different. The one bit that was right, that as discussed, if you heat any reaction, for every 10 degrees, you get an approximate doubling of the rate.
Right.
But my answer, which I'm hoping is a good answer, is biscuits in general, and nice biscuits in particular, have a thin patina of sugar. And what happens is, if you dip it in hot tea, the rate of dissolution of the sugar is very high, so the sugar dissolves away, and then the tea can find its way to all the nooks and crannies of the biscuit, and of course it swells up accordingly. In cold tea, the sugar takes longer to dissolve, and therefore the rate of reaction is much slower, and it takes that much longer for the tea to make its way into the biscuit. So I'm not buying this thing about molecules
moving faster, like nor am I. But I'm going to add something else to the mix, if I may, which is fat.
Yes, no, you're quite right, because biscuits we had this discussion with Jaffa cakes, didn't we?
We did.
The biscuits have got higher fat content, they've got high fat content and tend to be quite lipophilic, not hydrophilic, and therefore you have to have a much higher temperature for the water to make contact with the biscuit anyway. Brilliant.
So the sugar and the fat will melt, and that will make it absorb more.
Dissolve.
Why is hot liquid more solubilizing than cold liquid?
Because
solvent.
Things being hot, if you go down to absolute zero, nothing moves. The hotter you get, the more the molecules vibrate.
Yeah.
And therefore, that encourages dissolution or promotes dissolution and so forth.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I'll give you the full round of applause. But I enjoyed Pratap's contribution. There we go. You've moved early this week, Hal. There might be another one, then you'll kick yourself.
Thank you, James.
We shall see. It is 24 minutes after 12. Yvonne is in Fulham. Yvonne, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on, Yvonne.
Right, I've got a smallish, narrow garden.
Oh, yes.
Questions about spiders.
Okay.
And either side, I've got grass in the middle, and either side I've got shrubs or roses. And I'm forever walking down my garden and walking through spiders' webs.
Yes.
That go from one side to the other, a distance of probably a metre or maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
And I would like to know how a tiny spider manages to spin its web from one side to the other, that distance, when they can't fly and they can't jump. And it's always puzzled me how they manage to do it.
Can I have a go at this one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I want you to picture your own garden, actually.
Yeah.
And now there is a spider on the right-hand side of the garden.
Yeah.
Who climbs up really high to where the very top of the web will be.
Yeah.
And now he releases and spins, so he's sort of lowering himself down like a spider abseiler.
Right.
You got it? So he's
Yeah.
dangling now like a spider pendulum.
Yeah.
And then some wind, or he's waiting for some wind, or he can generate some sort of motion himself, and he swings. So he's got a metre-long bit of web now. Do you see it? A metre long with a little spider at the bottom, swinging like a pendulum, and then go! Got it! He's landed on the other side, and then he starts spinning his web.
That distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the length of the first bit of web, you see, to reach.
Okay.
So he spins it, he keeps spinning it until it's long enough for him to reach the other side.
So you'd need a pretty strong wind, would you?
Not necessarily. It's only a tiny little spider, isn't it? And in fact, the act of spinning the web may deliver some form of kinetic energy. It may give some sort of movement as well, because, you know, it's a physical act, isn't it? So almost like a little exhaust pipe, except he's pumping out web rather than gas.
Yeah, okay.
And they float in the breeze onto the other side and then wait for. I mean, it's it's an imperfect technique, but once you're on,
sometimes it's so high up.
Yeah, well,
and I think, how on earth do they do it?
Well, that's why.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Qualifications. I think we've done it. We've either done it before, or I've asked someone myself how it happened.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you sound like a satisfied customer, Yvonne.
I am very satisfied. Thank
That's
you.
lovely. Round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yvonne.
James.
Lovely
Bye.
stuff. Indeed, you look at them sometimes. How the heck did that tiny little thing do that? But when you think about it, it's quite straightforward. Kurt's in Torquay. Kurt, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
Hi, it's one about the reflective stripping on the fluorescent jacket.
Yes.
Okay, if you scale that up, it's got a texture to it.
Yes.
And if you can imagine a corner of a cube that's pressed into that material,
right?
What kind of dent that's going to make? It's going to make a three-sided dent.
Yeah.
Now, it was explained to us that if you cut the corner of that cube off, and it was demonstrated by firing a tennis ball machine at it.
Right.
You fire at those three angles, the actual tennis ball will come out the same way it went in. So therefore, if you shine a light at it, if you scale back down again, there's millions of these on the stripping, the light will hit it and come straight back out at where the light source came from.
So when, like a reflector on the back of a car, but in miniature?
Yes, it's
or the bicycle. You can see a form of sort of pyramid-y type shape inside reflectors, can't you?
That's right, and it bounces out the same way it went in.
So the light shines on it, and boom, it's shining right back at you.
That's right.
I don't know why he brought tennis balls into it, Kurt.
Well, it was the way it was explained to us. Apart from obviously gravity takes its toll on tennis balls, so it's going to be slightly out.
Qualifications?
But, I was a highways technician for 17 years.
There you go. So I mean, you needed to know why that was doing its job.
Yeah.
Love it. Round of applause for Kurt. I like that. We crossed that one off as well. No, lovely work. Hey, that's it. High vis, spiders. Haven't done the blanket, done the biscuit. So we just need to know if the premise of Terry's question is correct. Why do Scottish people tend to veer right when they're walking towards somebody, while English people veer left? And why does Etty, and indeed almost everybody else, feel the need to have a blanket covering them to fall asleep, even if their body temperature or the situation in which they find themselves is really warm and cosy? If you can answer either of those questions, 0345 6060 973. And it's only half time, so there's plenty of time to get more questions on the board as well, for which the number remains the same, 0345 6060 973. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
12:32 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the Mystery Hour continues. Your weekly yada yada yada. Just get on with it. Ken's in Canterbury. Ken, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, Ken.
I'm in my 50s and my wife is just turning 50 and she's going through menopause.
Oh yeah.
And my question is, do other mammals go through menopause?
You can't swap. You can't swap, Ken.
No thanks.
Do other female? So the cessation of the menstrual cycle, I presume they do. I mean,
it makes sense.
Yeah, all of my pets have been. I've only got a female dog, and she's been done, so that wouldn't work, would it? But you can't. Okay. I think that's quite an easy one to answer. You just need to know that one mammal does, don't you? And then you've got your answer. They must do. It must be something. It must be, mate. I'll give you 50p if it's not. But we need to know for sure. We need to know for sure. Do other mammals have the menopause?
Thank you.
No, thank you, Ken. Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I never thought of that before. 12:33 is the time. Terry's in Camden. Terry, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Good afternoon.
Hello, Terry. Carry on.
Athletics clubs or running clubs, they always have the term Harriers at the end. So be it Queen's Park Harriers, Sheffield Harriers. I'm wondering why the association with Harriers.
Kidderminster Harriers.
There you go.
Yeah. They are, of course, now a very famous football club who defied all the odds.
Which you mention regularly.
Just last month, defied all the odds to power into the promotion place for going up from the National League North, thanks to Russ Penn's magnificent management and some sterling performances. But they were originally an athletics club, so the athletics club became the football club, and that is why they are still called the Harriers. I know the answer to this.
Do you?
As you would expect.
But
no, I don't. I'm going to show you. I'm going to tell you. So, are you familiar with the game Hare and Hounds?
I've heard of the Hare and Hounds public house, but
that's a good name for a pub. So we used to play Hare and Hounds at school, and someone is the hare, and then everyone else is a hound. So it's like cross country running, basically, but with a little bit more excitement baked into it, with the thrill of the chase. And a hound that was used widely for chasing hares in real life was known as a harrier, like a harrier, if you see what I mean, chasing a hare, harrier. And most athletics clubs have their origins in quite long races or cross-country running. Ergo, they were harriers. The runners were harriers. Where are you, Terry?
Well, okay, I had to take that.
Where are you? What's the noise in the background?
Oh, there's some builders. There's a house around the corner from me that's having some work done by the look of it. I'm in Camden.
It sounded like a sort of whale. Like a whale as in W-A-I-L, not W-H-A-L-E. So that is the answer. Why do you sound unsatisfied or unimpressed?
Should I be satisfied? Everyone else puts an argument up when they hear the radio.
No, they don't. Some people recognise that an answer is obviously correct. Qualifications, Kidderminster Harriers fan, looked into it over the years. God, man.
I'll have to take it on the chin then. You're correct.
Well, someone's not getting a board game. Round of applause for me.
Thank you.
12:36 is the time. Deborah's in Brighton. Deborah, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
So when you get a mosquito bite, why does it sometimes start itching again about 2 weeks after you've had it? So I've had this quite a bit, and so have friends. So you get the bite, it itches like crazy, and then it starts to calm down, it flattens, it scabs over, and then suddenly, like a week or a week and a half later, it will start furiously itching again. And I just wonder why that was, because surely all the irritant that the mosquitoes put in must have gone by then.
Well, I've never heard that before. I'm just trying to see whether I recognise it. I'm quite lucky with mosquitoes generally, as it goes. Are you?
No. I get bitten really badly, and sometimes I've had quite bad swelling, especially on my legs. So I wonder if there's a correlation between that and the fact that they
your
start
ability
itching
to produce whatever it is you need to produce to deal with it. Okay, so a couple of weeks after it's gone, it comes back again. The itching comes back again.
So
is there a visible sign of it? Is there a visible sign of it?
It's kind of like, when you've had a bite, but it's calmed down and you've just got that kind of red mark and it's a little bit scab made. So it's like that. So it looks like it's healing. But
so it goes itchy, 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 not 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 itchy, itchy.
Exactly. Yeah. Itchy again. Why?
Itchy again. Why? I'll find out Well, I'll try. I can't make any promises, but I shall try to find out for you. Thank you, Deborah. So we got the mosquitoes. We've done the harriers. We've got the menopause, the mosquitoes, the blanket, and the Scottish people leaning to the right when they find themselves heading towards somebody. I got right. I don't want a steward's inquiry on the spider question. Hello? I don't want a steward's inquiry. I got it slightly wrong. I'm going to correct myself. I'm correcting myself on the spider question because I misremembered and realised shortly after hanging up the phone on Yvonne. So I have to apologise to Yvonne, who was very polite and satisfied with my answer, unlike some people I could mention. It's not the spider himself doesn't swing across, which explains why the breeze needs to be lighter. So Yvonne asked the perfect question, but so they spin out the thread and then wait for that to be blown by the breeze. The longer the thread, the better. Blown by the breeze, very sticky, tangles itself, gets stuck on the other side, and then bosh, he's off. he's off spinning the web. All right? My bad on that, but I'm not having a steward's inquiry on it. Craig's in Leeds. Craig, question or answer?
Answer.
Go on then.
It's about the reason that we walk on the left or the right-hand side.
I think you may have misunderstood the question.
Yeah, in Scotland.
Yeah, go on.
So we walk on the left-hand side to keep your sword hand free, which predominant was your right hand.
Yeah.
And in other countries, because of Napoleon, who was left-handed, he made his French armies walk on the right-hand side because he was left-handed, which was his sword hand.
Yeah.
So then when you go to places like Scotland that are visited with a lot of tourists, the tourists don't know the rules about having to walk on the left-hand side in the UK because they all tend to walk on the right-hand side.
But Terry is English, and you think he's going to encounter tourists outside
but
Scotland.
He's walking on the left, isn't he?
Yeah, but why would there be more tourists in Scotland than there are in London?
Edinburgh, there's a majority.
But London.
Yeah, but it happens in London. You walk around London, it happens all the time.
Terry doesn't think it does.
Or maybe Terry's wrong.
That is a possibility. I mean, we've said from the start that the premise of the question may be flawed.
Yeah, but if you go into the subways, there is signs that ask you to walk on the left-hand side.
I just don't think... Listen, you might be onto something, and I love the little bit of Napoleon knowledge, but I just don't think that I don't think the tourist angle is going to be the answer, really.
But it's the reason that we drive on the left and the right-hand side as well. Historically, it's passed on.
But it said countries conquered by Napoleon, so why would Scotland be more likely to have absorbed this via tourism than England? That's the problem, isn't it, with your answer? There's nothing factually incorrect apart from that final leap of
the same reason that they had a vote to leave the UK, maybe because they're just rebelling.
They got a closer affinity. It's the Old Alliance, isn't it? As far as Scotland, although I think that predates Napoleon. Oh, I don't think I can give you a round of applause. I mean, first of all, have you got any experience of it yourself? Don't lie to me.
I've walked into people accidentally when I've been in other countries. I've done a lot of foreign travel.
So they
walked on the left.
But you haven't compared Scotland. You haven't compared Leith to Leeds, for example, and noted a difference, have you?
No. But I mean, I say in France quite a lot. I have got it wrong, wandered around on the wrong side of the road, looking in museums and.
Well, what countries did he conquer? I mean. Did they do it in Austria? Did they do it in... I'm just trying to think, really. France. I give you a bit of a round of applause.
But the only reason I can think is because of the amount of tourists that there is.
So Terry is just... Well, we need to... Where was Terry calling from? He wasn't even calling from Edinburgh. He was calling from some place I'd never heard of. Like Boondoggle or something.
But that might be that, in Scotland, because you're free to roam in Scotland, and it's kind of single-track road.
Gurrock.
Maybe there isn't any right or left-hand side. It's just a single track.
Yeah, but then that would be the same in England. So it's, I don't know why. Maybe I'm being a bit cruel on this one.
Maybe.
I don't think Gurrock is a particular tourist spot, is it? Maybe it is. Don't at me now. It's on the coast near Glasgow, is it?
Oh, anywhere coastal in Scotland is touristy, isn't it?
Yeah, but anywhere coastal in England is touristy. Leeds is touristy, Craig.
You've been to Blackpool. It's not particularly touristy by foreign tourists.
Not anymore.
No.
Not that it ever was. Leeds is, though. Leeds has got some nice tourism spots.
I know, and an awful lot of students, but because the students, they're very quick at learning.
Yeah, I'm not having it. I'm sorry. I'm not having it. I'll come back with humble pie later, if that is the... But I just don't see Scotland as having a hubbub of tourism that transcends England. I'm not getting it. Thank you, Craig. Gary's in Ilford. Gary, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Your researcher said I've got far too much time on my hands with this one, so see what you think.
Go on.
So I was sitting in my room last week and on the computer, and then it's fly season, and there's a fly comes in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to it buzzing, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what note that is, because it was a note. It wasn't just a buzz, it was a note, right?
Yeah. What time of day was this?
I don't know, about sort of early afternoon.
All right, so I wasn't on the radio then.
No, you weren't on the radio.
All
then.
right,
No,
carry on
no.
then. Because honestly, if it was a choice between wondering what note a fly was buzzing at or listening to the big show, I'd be quite hurt.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
No, it was definitely after you. Don't worry.
All right, carry on then.
Suck up, right?
Yeah.
So I went on the computer and I got this note generator, and I found that the fly was buzzing at A flat.
Okay, that's quite interesting.
And I just wondered, right? You know, flies when they take off and they land, they don't do it. They don't decelerate and accelerate. They just kind of land and then they go boom, and they're off again, or they land. You know, so.
But they might be. They might be decelerating and accelerating.
Yeah, but we can't.
Incrementally, exactly.
Exactly. We can't perceive that. So my question is simply, do all flies buzz at A flat, or do you get some flies, like you get these really big blue bottles? I don't know.
No one else is as sad as you.
But
no one else
that's
is.
The whole point. That's the whole point of mystery.
You're the
hour,
man.
isn't
This
it?
is you. This is your discipline now. You're the man. You should be answering this question a year from now when you've completed your studies and research.
All right. So my first little bit of thought on it is.
So how many have you done? How many have you done so far in your experiments?
I've done about one.
This is enormous catastrophes happen as the consequence of this kind of slapdash science, Gary.
I don't think it's an empirical study.
It's certainly not peer-reviewed, is it? That's for certain. No. I've done one. So you've stuck one fly in front of a microphone near your computer, and it came up A flat, and you phoned me.
Not even in front of a microphone. It's just because I've got quite good pitch, right?
Yeah.
I just said, what note is it nearest to? And it was nearest to A flat.
But you did. So you did the noise yourself?
No. In my head, right? So I listened to the fly buzzing. I thought, right.
So you didn't even. The computer hasn't even analysed the fly.
No. It was me analysing it.
So the computer played an A flat, and you thought that's the fly.
Correct.
This is pathetic. No, I'm not. I'm not even joking, mate. I can't believe this. The quality of questions lately has been off the charts. This would have been a really good question. I thought you'd put at least 12 flies in some sort of chamber.
You know what? I haven't even been tempted since I've heard other flies to measure their note.
But you can't even say for sure that it was A flat.
No, I can.
Was that it then? Did you just do A flat then? Was that you doing A flat there? Was it?
It could have been.
Give me an A flat. Give me an A flat.
I'm not pitch perfect, so I'd need.
Well, then how do you know it was A flat then?
No, because when the fly was buzzing, I had the note in my head. If I go la, that note is in your head, and then you go on the computer and you get the closest note, and that was it. It was A flat.
I mean, I don't know what to say, frankly. One fly, Gary.
Yeah, one fly.
One fly via you.
But based on this conversation, I will carry out more research.
Well, then get back in touch when you have. Professor Howell, who was on earlier, is the professor of the public understanding of science at the University of Brighton. That's the standard, mate. You can't. Do you think he'd come on and say, "Oh, I heard a fly and I thought it was A flat"?
I reckon he might just phone in on this one.
I don't think he will. We'll find out. All right then. Well, but I mean, what even is the question? That might be the only fly in the world that buzzes at A flat. Might have had a cold.
Do all flies buzz at A flat? That's my question.
All right.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Have a good day. Buzz off.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It's 12:51. Questions that still need answers. Do other mammals get the menopause? I think the Scottish walking on the right question might benefit. We should be able to get a question. Why do you still need a blanket to cover you to sleep, even when you're really, really hot anyway? You don't need it for warmth. Do all flies buzz at A flat? Honestly, it's all gone a bit insect-based, hasn't it, in the last 10 minutes? Mosquito bites that come back after a fortnight or so they stop itching for a while and then they start again. What's that all about? I think that covers it. Helen is in Newton Abbot. Helen, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello,
it's
Helen.
an answer.
Carry on.
It's the menopause one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I believe that orcas, killer whales, experience the menopause and live on after it. And the reason
is that it? Is that just whales?
Well, I don't know if I don't know the answer to that. I know that orcas do.
Fine. No, that is the answer, is it? Do any other mammals have it? And you've answered yes. These ones do. But I'm curious now as to why it's so rare.
It's fascinating. Yeah. The answer as to why it's so fascinating is because it's about the richness of the culture of their society. So if you think about it, if you've got to spend a lot of time bringing up your children and giving them a lot of knowledge, like we do, we spend 18 years bringing up our children, longer sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, tell me about it.
Killer whales, orcas, have a rich society and they have a lot to learn. And so the grandmothers are useful after their breeding time is finished. There's a evolutionary
it's quite
benefit
brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. Most mammals, after
so natural selection. There's no point having the females around once they've lost the ability to breed. So
so that's it. And
that's a brilliant answer.
The other places that you could look are other mammals that do have rich cultures. So you'd be looking at great apes, and I don't know.
But you don't need to know. You've answered the question successfully. Qualifications?
I studied zoology as an undergraduate years ago, but I was also a breastfeeding counsellor, and so I was very interested in parenting, and it came up then, I think, rather than in
your zoology studies. So orcas, killer whales, have the menopause, and so do humans, or human women. Round of applause for Helen. That's absolutely fascinating. You won't forget that one. Actually, I'll forget loads all the time, and some stuff comes up, I've forgotten it by the following week. Won't forget that. Killer whales have the menopause. I don't know why. It'll stick, won't it, that one? I'm pretty sure it will. Gordon's in Romford. Gordon, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
This is to do with the mosquito question.
Excellent.
And when we have reactions, we talk about type 1 reactions, which are the ones that people would usually get, where you get a lot of histamine being released at the site of the bite. But you get what we call a type 4 hypersensitivity reaction, sometimes called a delayed type hypersensitivity reaction. And this is actually where it uses the what we call humoral immune system, the acquired immune system, and it's an antibody-mediated reaction, usually mediated by the T lymphocytes.
Right.
And that's why it will take a lot longer to develop. And will actually take a lot longer for the bite to settle, and antihistamines usually won't work quite as well for those. But we do see it a lot in cats.
Really? And some humans. So
yes.
But the question, Deborah's question, was that she gets the response, the reaction first, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. Has your answer fitted that?
She's got both. She's getting immediate hypersensitivity and the type 4 hypersensitivity.
So there's two reactions going on.
Yes.
Oh, what a brilliant answer. Qualifications?
I'm actually an advanced practitioner in small animal dermatology.
Wow. How small? So you're looking at
smallest dogs and cats. I'm a vet that is certified in veterinary dermatology.
How big a discipline is that? How many of you are there around the place?
But currently, at least on the advanced practitioner list of small animal dermatology, I think there's only about 18 of us.
I think that's. Do you listen often to the programme, Gordon?
Oh, it's my first time caller. So I loved it.
But do you know what a Ray Liotta is?
Oh, you're going to make me cry, mate.
Oh, you got yourself one, mate. Here you go.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it,
they will come.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. That's a beautiful answer. And I love that. There's only about 18 of that. Was a moment. Wow, I got shivers. Gordon, great, mate. Thank you. Nigel's in Gosport. Nigel, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Thank you for taking my call. So it's about the blanket one.
Yes.
Why do we sleep? So you touched on a couple of points. I just want to expand on them. So there's a number of reasons. Firstly, our body temperature drops when we're asleep.
Yes.
So naturally, we need a blanket to help regulate it. It helps also to regulate moisture.
So the inside drops, not just the outside, of course.
Yeah, our body temperature drops when we sleep.
Yeah.
Also regulates moisture. Stops our skin drying out.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a pretty small one, but it's a sensory thing. So it almost feels like we're having a hug. And that, as you touched on earlier, produces the serotonin, and also melatonin, which is the sort of the natural thing our brain releases to help us sleep. And my favourite one of all is it's a routine thing. It's actually the brain just thinks something's simply missing.
Yeah. All of that makes sense. I like the fact that there's different answers to a collection of our circumstances. What are your qualifications?
I get awful night sweats, so I've done nothing but research this for the past few months.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's all right.
Can I ask? I'm sure you. I hope this isn't inappropriate. Do you drink a lot of wine?
No, I don't at all.
Because I used to get night sweats. Not terrible night sweats, but when I was on newspapers, I was drinking more wine than is healthy, and then I stopped, and they stopped immediately. But that's no use to you at all, is it?
No, not quite.
My apologies. But you got a round of applause at least.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Only white wine as well. A bit bizarrely, it didn't happen with red wine. But anyway, well, it's not really. You're just being polite. Carrie's in Erith. Carrie, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Right, I really cracked up when I was listening to The Fly with the A flat, because my life is just spent listening to buses making certain sounds, and I'm like, that's got to be a C, that's got to be a D.
Oh, really?
So, because I'm a music teacher. My husband's a DJ as well, so we spend our life going, oh, did you hear that? That sounds like, that could be in this key, or all these different sounds.
Oh, wow.
No.
Go on, then.
So my answer is that I don't reckon that they're all in A flat because of the size of the insects themselves.
So obviously,
right?
So like a tiny little fly is buzzing away at a right old height, like a mosquito. It's like, nee!
Yeah, exactly. It's going to go woo, right up there. And then you've got the real deep ones. But then if you relate it to the families of instruments in an orchestra, then the smaller instruments like the violin, it will play really high pitch. And then you've got the double bass play really low.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
So no way are they all B flat or A flat or whatever it was.
I don't reckon they are, but you know what? I'm gonna try and find out.
Well, keep us posted.
Because I also hate hearing flies fly around. It's my worst sound ever. But I'm going to start listening to them. When I'm at home, I'm going to get the piano and I'm just going to check it out, and I'll send you a little. Send you an email.
Let us know. So Gary will be great. I mean, Gary's research was frankly pathetic, to be honest with you. But I think you've done more research just thinking about it than he did setting up the question in the first place. Round of applause for Gary.
Thank you.
Beautifully done. Beautifully done. I'm hard to pick a favourite this week, and I forgot to write down quite a lot of names. Who got the Harriers question right? I might give it to them. Oh, that was me. Gordon. It's got to be Gordon, hasn't it? It's got to be Gordon, the small animals dermatologist. It was just such a beautiful moment there, I felt. Gordon gets the board game. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can, of course, also rewind live radio. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts, including Full Disclosure, my own little effort. So rewind live radio on Global Player, or download it for free from your app store. Head to globalplayer.com. Lewis Goodall in for Tom Swarbrick at 4. Sangeeta Maiska in for Sheila Fogarty. Now. 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 Fogarty. Now.